He said he pictured tents in camp and meditate and look at the sky, which is great. He said he, dark sky with a new moon, right? Picture tents in camp. And we call it Seaside.
Sounds like a party.
Seaside.
How is it that the film that has like the closest depiction of elite ritual parties filmed at the Rothschilds' mansion came out a year to the day of the filming of Bohemian Grove, and that the man who was in charge of the project was the only man in the world with complete access to all of its archives?
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica Show. We are going to be chatting with David Charles Plate, Black Plate, again a little bit later. Actually, we did a little video on this one, so you got to see David. Wasn't what I was expecting. He's a great guy, though. Got to see his messy place. It was good to see his place was as messy as the igloo. It's always refreshing. We did do an episode with David. I think it was only like 6 months ago, too, so you might want to go back and check out this one. And, yeah, David wanted to come back, so we had him back on, and we talk about a bunch more crazy stuff. And, yeah, check out the movies. One of you guys that still eats acid needs to eat acid and watch the Sorry Cassandra movie and record the whole debacle and then send it to us.
As if you'd watch a 7-hour debacle.
On acid, you could.
So he's one of these guests where I thought that I forgot how interesting our first conversation was as we started.
Yeah, you know what? I had meant to listen to the first one to make sure we didn't repeat ourselves too much. And then we got tied up. I'm sure we did some repeating. I'm sure.
Yeah. No, but there's still a lot of interesting.
It's longer too. Yeah, it's great. There. You guys should enjoy it. But yeah, first look, he's already chimed up here. The one and only. Freeze my balls off, C City Graham.
Oh yeah, that was a cold one. Make sure you ask me about that.
I just did, I suppose.
You want to get right into it?
No, not quite.
You want to do our begging for support first?
Right off the bat, you want to beg for money right out of the gate? That's probably not a bad idea.
Okay, let's just get it over.
Nobody gives us any money, so maybe if we do it now, before they skip ahead.
No, we do appreciate all the new subscribers, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they now have access to our extra content, so nothing has changed in Grimerica, but we do have a bunch of extra content out there, a little more controversial, maybe a little more political sometimes, different types of stuff as well.
That's right. And the word on the street is that...
You mean the word in the chat? Is that where you're getting your street from?
I forgot what I was going to say.
About the bonus.
Oh, the word on the street is that the new iOS 11, I can actually take a little video of my screen. So I think I'll be able to make a little video of how
instead of a screenshot.
Yeah.
It's a screen vid.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You do it, like and then you can record for a minute. So I should be able to make a little video of how to subscribe to the Black Budget feed. Because it's an ongoing problem.
Is it really?
Yep. So do remember, I did make the website. So if you email me, I can give you a special password protected URL that'll get you that way.
If you're not using a podcatcher.
If you're not using a podcatcher, if you don't know how. Or if you're one of the YouTube people, one of the weird YouTube people, like Coop. You know what I'm saying?
So, let's explain this from the beginning. So if you donate anything, any amount, any one time, any monthly subscription, Darren will see it and email you manually. This is the way we do it here. It's not like this huge automated process. It's not like automated spam. Darren will email you a link for your podcatcher or your podcast player. If you're not using that, he can send you a protected URL to listen on the website. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. So it's a whole separate feed in your podcatcher, and there's also a way to do it without that. So it's manual. Be patient. If you don't hear from him, email me.
No, I'm pretty good on that. I like to think I keep up to date because now that I'm caught up on everyone, so like I say, if you're on a monthly and you don't have it yet, something is wrong. Because I think I'm up to date.
Okay.
Right now.
Okay, good to know. He's not up to date with reading my emails.
At one time every day. Yeah, with new subscribers, you know.
Yeah.
I get 2 emails in a row when a new subscriber comes on. So
Yeah, I'm having
double whammy.
No, and if
I've got it copied, so it's really like, usually what I'll do is the second I get the email notification, I'll do it right then because it literally takes like fucking 5 seconds. I just copy paste, boom, boom.
Yeah.
I have it saved in my notes.
Okay, good. And you can email me too, Graham@Grimerica.com for your stories and synchronicities and sightings and stuff like that. I do read them all, and I try to reply to all of them as well. And if you haven't heard from me, you can always just remind me. I lose track sometimes. It is hard to keep up sometimes with the show and everything else going on.
It can be nearly impossible to try to keep it, especially when you get in one of those little streaks where they're just coming in like wham, wham, wham.
Yeah.
Shit gets tricky.
So yeah, there's other ways. You can leave voicemails. There's other ways to support the show. There's
no one ever leaves voicemail.
T-shirts. Somebody else was asking about they're going to leave a voicemail.
Have I played all the most recent voicemails actually? The last ones I played were the Eclipse ones, I think, right?
And we also have some garments and swag on Redbubble. You can go to grimerica.ca/swag. And it's all in the show notes as well, all the ways to support us.
Yeah, there's a whole list of shit that you guys should be doing.
And honestly, we can't do it without you, and we don't want ads. We don't want sponsors. This is like surely purely listener support, and that's it. Okay. Have you listened to it yet?
No.
Well, this is kind of risky.
Yeah. Hello, Darren and Graham. Nicky B here.
It's Nicky the dude.
Figured out how to do this, maybe. So here it goes. Eclipse report. Had a great time in Hopkinsville. Met Janine, fellow Grimerican from episode 200. Nice chat with her. Met good people at the cemetery where Edgar Casey is buried. It's where I watched the eclipse from.
Wow.
It's very quiet, very calming. Down there, we could hear the town going crazy, having a big party up there. But really enjoyed what we were doing and met Matt, David, Kim, several other people there. Hopefully I get some good pictures from David, as I've already gotten a couple. One you can see on my Facebook profile, and also the Eclipse picture I'm using as my profile pic on the Discord chats now is from David also. He says he's got lots more coming. Hopefully they'll be as good as those are. Headed to CryptidCon this weekend. Ooh. So now that I've got this speak pipe thing going, maybe I'll get some good shout outs from friends and family there.
Except Darren didn't play it in time.
Continue on. Just do better. And hey, Camelin, good job on staying away from that nicotine. Keep it going, man. Later.
Right on.
2 people I got to quit smoking now. So wait, I actually have his CryptidCon report.
Oh, good. Yeah. Sorry, Nicky, it's a little late there. Probably after.
No, it's only a week old. Well, actually, no, never mind. Older than that. This one's not that old, though. This one's only from the 9th.
Here at CryptidCon 2017, Frankfort, Kentucky. Missed Lyle Blackburn's talk, but met him in the merch area. Got a couple of movies from him. Listened to some of Lauren Coleman's talk. Listened to some of Bruce, can't remember his last name right now, talk. Sea serpents and local lake monsters. Pretty interesting so far. Get back with y'all later. This is Nicky B signing off.
Thanks, Nicky.
Thanks, Nicky B. All right.
Okay, there we go. We had the new moon, dark sky, which is great. Had a planned camping, pitched a tent, went back there for the night. At least stayed through your...
remind me, I have to play it out with Ryan's jingle. I totally forgot again.
Pow, pow. We started seeing flashbulbs. Streakers coming down. Graham Dunlop.
is.
We need to make a music video for that. I could just picture you doing the pow, pow, pow with your fist. That's how you get into Mars One,
Okay,
bro.
that's enough. That's enough.
Theatrics.
No, I pretty missed my Mars One chance.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're way too old.
Yeah.
Actually, they might need a wise old sage.
I need more of a scientific background. Anyways. So, yeah. So we went out. Another Sea trip. Again, the best part about it was the company and chit-chatting with people. Lots of things in common. It was great. Shout out to Brian, who, so Brian, Jason, and I stayed overnight in our tents. Woke up in the morning, frost everywhere. I think it was like -5. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Cold.
You were in the mountains, right?
No.
Is it going down to -5 here? I haven't had frost here yet.
Yeah, it's been frosty in the city.
Has it?
Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, 9 of us did the same type of thing, same type of protocols. Yeah, lots of activity again. Right away, different activity though, a little bit different. Like still flash bulbs and stuff like that. We didn't see those 2 lights come flying in low and silent and all the way across the sky like before, but we definitely saw lots of stuff, lots of flash bulbs, a couple different lights. So I mean, it was good. It was a success. We only stayed out there for a couple hours because it was pretty cold, like literally, barely above 0.
Yeah, that's cold.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is me and Mike were in the studio that night talking about how if we knew where we were, we would come and stalk you.
It's secret.
I know. So that's why you don't tell me, because I totally would have came. Me and Mike were in here bored, so we were watching YouTube videos. We totally would have stalked you guys out.
We tried to see the Iridium flare. I've got a new satellite app, so it can track satellites, make sure that we're not, looking at satellites. But we missed it. I couldn't see the Iridium flare.
I use Sputnik.
Yeah, I tried that. That's the one that was telling me where the Iridium was, but I didn't see it.
Really?
But yeah, but it was really good. Clear night again. It was gorgeous.
I think you can see the ISS a lot of the time too.
So the interesting thing is, man, it's like, we went a few months, almost a couple of years, probably with not a lot of activity. And now last 2 times in that spot, there's definitely more activity and slightly different activity as well. But flash bulbs. You
guys are starting to gel.
Yeah, maybe.
It's all the coherence, all about coherence.
Be. Yeah, that's right. You're learning. Hey, you can come out one day, maybe.
I don't think I should.
So, yeah. What else?
Wow, are you done CSETI?
Well, yeah.
Okay, I gotta play Ryan's jingle.
Okay. We call it CSETI. Put your tents in camp and meditate and look at the sky. This is great. CSETI. Okay, that's enough. Thanks, Ryan. Dark sky with a new moon, right? Put your tents in camp. Oh, no. CSETI.
Sounds like a party.
CSETI. I'm not going to want to. Okay, that's enough. That's enough. Too much repetitiveness there.
That was the end of it.
Yeah, I'm not even going to want to tell my stories anymore.
Oh, come on. These are the best. We're getting the best jingles we've ever got on your CSETI stuff.
So anyways, we might start some new groups.
So at the 9-minute mark of the Frank Joseph episode, there could be some juicy tidbits in there, just saying.
I don't even remember that stuff.
It's your Mars One application.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Till you made me shut it off anyway. You want to play it?
No.
I'm quick. Witted?
No. Is that where that was coming from?
Yeah. I listened to it like 4 times. Oh, fuck.
We got time for a weather modification segment? I've been wanting to do this for a while.
Yeah, you have. Okay.
It's a bit long, though.
Of course it is. You know what? I'll even give you your decent, which one is
Kate
it?
Bush jingle?
No, don't work no more? What the fuck? Oh. think the
Oh,
jingles.
that's it, eh? The jingles are done. The jingle machine broke.
The jingle machine seems to have broke.
Did you jiggle the cord?
I'm going to see here. Let's try.
The researcher.
Oh, that's pretty good. Oh, that's the wrong one, though.
Death dumps, otherwise known as chemical trails, being dropped and sprayed throughout the United States, England, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Europe, and I have personally seen them not only in the United States but in Mexico and Canada. Birds are dying around the world. Fish are dying by the hundreds of thousands around the world. This is genocide.
All right, so there's lots of information now about geoengineering and
By the United Nations,
weather modification, chemtrails, that kind of stuff.
society is doing it. Must.
That's right.
Especially after this, Harvey and Irma. So, I mean, it was pretty raw. We don't really want to talk. I don't want to throw a bunch of, crazy stuff out there, but definitely,
yeah.
but we got lots of listeners and stuff that love this segment and have been sending me stuff. And we're mentioned. Our city is mentioned in one of these clips that I'm about to play. And
Yeah.
it's a citizen.
Who says you're going to play any clips?
The cord.
Quick. With it.
I forgot all about that. So this is a guy who sneaks in. No, he doesn't sneak in. I mean, he goes in like normal into a weather modification company, and he's interviewing a pilot.
Ooh.
So I'll play a little bit of it, but then I might mute it and just read the transcript a little bit. Or actually, I could probably just play it. So here we'll see what it sounds like.
Are you one of the pilots that does the weather model? Yeah, sure. Now, can you be in a video of me? I'm doing a documentary about what you guys do. Can you just tell me what you do?
I can't be in a video until I get approved by somebody else.
Oh, you gotta get approved.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm only here for like a couple hours. I actually came from working to do this place. But
So the camera's not really pointing at the guy; it's just hanging off his lapel or something like that.
What you do?
Flying through thunderstorms.
So is that what you do?
Yep.
So you fly an airplane that has chemical attachment things?
Yep. We use silver iodide.
Silver iodide.
Yeah. And the reason we use it is inert. It's environment.
So he's saying that silver iodide is safe,
You'll never find it in the background.
Right.
You know.
and you'll never find it in the background.
When it burns into a crystal form. It looks just like an ice crystal. So when you put it in a cloud, the water says, hey, it's one of my own, and it attaches to it and freezes.
Okay, so it makes it so.
So did you catch that? So
Then.
what?
Yep.
Silver iodide burns and turns into an ice crystal and attaches itself to the cloud, right? So there has to be a cloud there apparently for this. I'll keep
It makes
going.
clouds, basically.
No, it makes...
There's one of your clips, Michio Kaku,
Yeah, the cloud already has
talking
to
about
be
his
there.
trillion-watt lasers.
No.
Right?
So the ingredients have to be there, but sometimes the ingredients are there, and in the natural process, it doesn't multiply and get going, so then nothing comes out in the rain, the snow, whatever.
Right. So is there currently projects going on in the United States right now?
Yep. We have a project in North Dakota for rainfall enhancement and hail mitigation.
Really?
Minimizing the effects of hail. We have one in Calgary.
So you can stop
Calgary!
Minimize the effects.
minimize the effects of it.
Yeah.
Make it small.
Yeah.
But so can you cause it not to rain too?
No.
Yeah.
Not my experience.
So,
The
but
Chinese say they can. I don't know that they can.
yeah.
So he's got some notes on here that they do it.
Right.
They do it with barium salts.
They said they stopped rain.
Yeah. Well,
So we haven't perfected that in the United States?
No.
Or you guys have?
well, we haven't. I don't think anybody has in the
Really?
world. The Chinese say they do, but scientifically, when they explain it, it doesn't make sense.
Right. So when
So-
you get your orders, you just fly where they tell you to fly. Right?
For the most part. I mean, when we're working, we're on a contract with somebody, a state government, a state entity, a foreign government,
Right.
or a water district, that has hired us. So we have an area that we can only fly in.
Right. Whatever
Whatever
your
our project area is.
right. And so you get contracts from the United States government, right?
Nope.
Oh, you don't?
Nope.
but other governments of other countries.
Yeah, like counties. Like in North Dakota, there are 4 counties that get together, vote on it, levy their taxes, and then the state, through the state of North Dakota, they also get a little bit of funding. I think it's like 10%.
Really?
And then that's it. Then they pay for it themselves.
So the state government pays for it?
The counties pay for it by voting on it and levying mills.
Really?
To get taxes, yeah. There.
Wow.
Now, some places, a water district, will take their, I don't know where their money comes from exactly, but like a watershed area.
Right.
And they'll take probably taxes as well, and they'll set it up, vote on it, yep, we're going to do this project. So some places are power companies, like hydro water companies. They'll pay for it themselves.
Right.
And Calgary, an insurance company, pays for it.
So I saw the thing out there. You have the lime ones too?
Yep.
That one out there that I saw in the parking lot.
Yep, that's for
snowpack in the mountains.
So
they increase the snow in mountains.
Oh, you did?
Down there, but that's for...
Perfect. That's better for skiing. You should be all over that.
Yeah. I mean, we've known this is going on. I mean, we've talked about it for years on the show. We've read government documents and all that kind of stuff, but it's just cool to hear a pilot talking about it. I mean, even James was going to bring us out, one of these days.
To seed hail clouds.
To seed hail, yeah.
That sounds fun, actually.
So,
I can get down with
so this is just one little company who's doing weather modification for a bunch of different
we'll throw magnets out the door.
And then, like you mentioned, the insurance company in Calgary paying millions a year for hail suppression.
There's some insurance back in my hometown.
What?
There was some hail in back of my hometown.
Yeah.
Fuck, I think it rode off a bunch of vehicles.
Really, eh?
Damage so bad they just write them off.
Wow.
Think of what that fucking cost.
Should have drove down there. I'm sure your car was under fire.
No doubt, just beat it with a bat.
So then I got this other one. It's about 5 minutes long if we got time.
5 fucking minutes?
Yeah, it's a newscast.
We'll see. I might cut you off at some point.
Okay. So it says here, if you don't believe in chemtrails or weather modification, then you need to watch this. So this is an actual mainstream. This is on Nightline, ABC News.
Fake news.
Craig Funky is flying me to the edge of a violent thunderstorm.
You see how nice and crisp the top of that cloud is up there?
Yeah. But the former commercial pilot isn't some adrenaline junkie courting danger. He's a cloud seeder, chasing this menacing storm to squeeze out extra rain for the drought-stricken farmland below.
As a pilot going through school, you're taught to avoid thunderstorm.
This is Craig's job.
He's got a picture here of a bunch of rockets on the back of his wing, all lit up.
A rainmaker.
That dark, thick cloud over there has lots of moisture in it.
That's part of the cloud that was seeded. It actually looks heavy with rain.
Cloud seeding has been used around the world for decades, but it's now getting a closer look as farmers desperate for solutions endure their 4th month of record-shattering drought with no end in sight. It's actually the largest drought in half a century, responsible for rising food prices and record wildfires. It's even suspected to be a cause for the recent surge in cases of West Nile virus. So we came to South Texas to find out if cloud seeding can really maximize our most precious resource, or if it's just a romantic notion that doesn't hold water.
We can't manufacture a cloud. That is just absolute basic.
Bullshit.
We cannot make it rain if it was not going to rain to begin with.
Tommy Shearer is president of the Texas Weather Modification Association. He's quick to explain that he can only enhance the weather, not create it.
Oh, sure.
The cloud is a factory. We're inducing a lot of raw material into the factory so that the factory becomes more efficient.
And more productive.
Consequently, more productive.
His team of pilots and meteorologists are constantly scanning the skies for the right clouds to seed.
Where everybody's going to get some good rain.
After 10 bone-dry days, a promising cluster of thunderstorms is finally headed their way. Butch is today's standby pilot. He takes the first run.
It looks got all these flares on the back of the wing.
Up in the air, we get a bird's-eye view of Butch's delicate dance.
He's just working the very edge of it.
And then, Butch finds the cloud sweet spot.
Okay, he's fixing to light a flare. Okay.
Oh, I see the flare.
Yeah.
It looks like he's painting the sky.
Oh.
The
Looks like he's painting the sky. Huh. Wonder what that looks like.
Particles into the cloud, where they collide with drops of water and ice and produce even more moisture. Then usually
silver iodide and what?
You know what? That's so weird.
Then
sounded like.
So what is this white smoky stuff over here?
That's rain.
Oh, that's
more moisture. Then with drops of water and ice and produce even fluoride particles into the cloud.
Fluoride, that's it.
No. Was it?
Flares are shooting millions of silver iodide and calcium chloride particles.
Oh, calcium chloride.
Where they collide with drops of water and ice and produce even more moisture. Then, usually within 20 minutes...
So what is this white smoky stuff over here?
That's rain.
Oh, that's rain.
Yeah, that's rain. All this is rain out there during September, November, turn of left space. When you go out and you see for a few hours or all day long and really know you did some good, it's a good feeling.
The radar data collected today adds to a growing body of evidence that cloud seeding works. It can double the amount of moisture in a given cloud, and the Texas programs boast a 12% increase in annual rainfall, thanks to seeding. And long-term studies show those chemicals are environmentally safe and can't even be detected in the rainfall. But despite all the data, some of cloud seeding's biggest critics are surprisingly the very farmers who stand to benefit most.
This isn't the first drought we've been through, and it won't be the last.
Bill Slumchinsky's family has been farming this land for 5 generations. He and his son Brett tell us it's expensive to irrigate 300 acres of crops. All that watering cuts deeply into profits, but they are skeptical that anything short of divine intervention can actually make more rain.
What do you make of the cloud seeding program?
Well, when you've been in a drought since '96 and we've had one wet year, is it working?
We can't stop droughts. We can't break droughts. We just try and put a little more water on the ground.
And every drop of water, Craig explains, helps feed the underground aquifer used to irrigate crops. So though he can't promise Bill and Brett more rainy days, he's convinced cloud seeding is helping them in the long run.
Okay, I got the MSDS for calcium chloride.
Oh, right on. Good job, buddy.
We got...
Wait, before you say that, the MSDS of the other one, the silver iodide, was read after. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes, but the Citizen Journal one, the last half of that video was a lady reading the MSDS from...
Part of the video I just cut off?
No.
Oh, okay. So the potential acute health effects, hazardous in case of skin contact, irritant, or eye contact, or ingestion, no inhalation, slightly hazardous in case of skin contact. Potential chronic health effects, carcinogenic effects not available.
Oh, yeah, that was
mutagenic effects, mutagenic for mammalian somatic cells, mutagenic for bacteria and/or yeast. The substance may be toxic to the heart, cardiovascular system. Repeated or prolonged exposure to the substance can produce target organ damage.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that they're doing that for any ulterior motive except for to create more rain. I mean, I don't think that's right, but I'm not saying it's any more extreme than that. But, of course, the annoying part of it is they don't take that into account with this global warming fear-mongering, right?
That's right.
So if you're making it rain everywhere or making it snow everywhere, how is that not affecting the climate? If you're measuring stuff and you're making predictions based on that, how is this not taken into account? Like, I would go as far as to say that this is making more of this intentional global weather modification is making more of a difference than us spewing out carbon dioxide. Who knows? Like, I'm just totally speculating. But
yeah, you're speculating. The rambling speculator.
I got a couple other things here, too. I wonder if I should just save them for next time.
We got 12 minutes.
So, I mean, where do you want to go with this here? So,
You already did the spiel, right?
So there's an interesting weather mod report that I actually just got from Instagram. And Adam Curry talked about this on the show. And, you know, he kind of sloughed it off. No agenda. Sorry. He kind of sloughed it off a little bit because it was far away from Houston. But this is a Pecos weather
pictures Michael were sending us of the way the hot and cold, or the warm and cold fronts were lining up to suck the storm into what's it called, were pretty impressive.
Into Houston?
Once you start thinking like that, you can almost look at it like a big game of like global weather chess.
Yeah.
Like maybe Mexico did it, so then we hit them with an earthquake.
It's not funny.
No, it's not funny.
But this is a report.
There was another fucking earthquake today.
Really?
Yeah, a worse one. Yeah, a real bad one today.
Wow.
That's 2 in 2 weeks.
I'm not paying for that wall.
Whoa.
Trans-Pecos Weather Modification Association. So this is in Texas. A seeding report from August 24th, 2017. So it says, the southwesterly flow aloft will work in conjunction with abundant surface moisture to help initiate shower and storms. It appears to be the best shot will be across the western sections of the Trans-Pecos where a weak dry line is set up. And then it goes down further on. So then it talks about the freezing levels and the lifting mechanism and all this stuff. And it says, discussion. Shower and storms were ongoing across southern New Mexico into the northern edges of Trans-Pecos. And then let me see what it says here. And then it says, pilot will fly along the south to north heading ahead of the convection to see what we have to work with. Pilot arrived at the larger shower system in the Culberson Reeves County, that's Texas apparently, for seeding opportunity. Yeah, so we took it and fired 2 dosages of glaciogenic flares, but pilot was getting into some heavily embedded cloud coverage. We'll move to the northeast just out of the town where the development is ongoing. However, it appears that the anvil from larger system to west has blocked any additional heating. Still, 1 dosage of seeding took place in this cluster of new shower storm development. The pilot tried to give other showers a fair shot, but Mother Nature was not playing along today. We'll return at 22%. No, we'll RTB at 22% and regroup for tomorrow. And then it talks about like flare locations and seeding operations were conducted over Reeves County. 6 flares were burned within 2 clouds. This is the first day of seeding in August and the 8th day of seeding during the season. So it's not a lot in that area, but you know, couldn't you argue that you're fucking with the weather pretty close to where the hurricanes are? Like, should we really be fucking with the weather?
I think I'd argue that we should.
Come on. Really? No, seriously though.
Why not?
Come on, because we don't know the effects of it. Sorry. Just if you don't like it, move. Like, people should be migrating to where it's safe.
Probably.
In general, you know, our culture, not just fucking with the weather. Like, I don't know. I just got a major problem with it right now.
For a while.
Yeah, for a while.
For like a year.
Yeah. Well, because then they're calling us deniers, right? That we deny climate change and all these buzzwords and, you know, way to pigeonhole us into some sort of crazy category when this is going on all over the world. And this is just like, this guy is saying how he's pretty quick to say, oh, we don't create clouds and all that, right? I'm sure other people are doing that in their programs, right? Stop me from saying right. Anyways, I'll save some for another one, so I'll do another one after this next week. I'll do part 2.
Sounds good. Part 2. We do have to wrap it up. We're live on this other show in 7 minutes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, we don't normally have time constraints like this, but today we do.
Are you doing the quote or are we skipping it?
UFO quote. No, we got to do it, man, for all those fans out there that like the UFO quote.
Profound UFO quote of the week.
This thing had to be going double-digit Mach, making turns that I didn't think were possible, breaking all the rules of physics. The man that visited me later told me in no uncertain terms to keep quiet. He told me I would lose my pilot's license and it would be the end of my flying days. For 30 years, I've said nothing. That's retired Air Force pilot Milton Torres discussing this F-86D Sabre fighter jet UFO incident in 1957, in which he was ordered to shoot down a UFO hovering over the British countryside. And that's from the Air Force Times Review, 2008.
There you have it. That's it. We'll jump into chat. I did actually want to mention that the earthquakes in Mexico are no laughing matter, and our hearts go out to anyone down there who is affected by them. I know I've seen, I think there's already like 50 or 80 people killed and some people trapped. And Red's thing broke. Something fell at Red's house and broke.
What are you saying? Don't send more hurricanes up our way? Or
no more fucking, you know, if people are fucking with the weather, they got to cut that shit out. You gotta wonder, eh? Or if it's all connected to the sun, or if maybe fucking Yellowstone's gonna erupt on the 23rd and the world's gonna end.
23rd, that's coming up.
September 23rd, yeah, it's like Sunday. Yeah, man. World might end this weekend. All right, guys, enjoy the chat with David Charles Plate.
Back in the studio, we've got David Charles Plate with us from syncbook.com. Myths, Magic, Media, and Mindscapes is a community exploring the impossible, mixed media type stuff. Welcome back to the show, David. It's good to have you here.
Hey, glad to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fun. I got a quick story here right off the bat from our last episode. Like, we were talking a lot about your synchronicities between Pink Floyd and different movies and stuff like that. So we had a meet up at this cabin. I mean, I don't know if we want to get into this right now, but we could.
You should,
right off the bat, yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I'm interested.
So we had this meetup at the cabin, and we were playing. I mean, the internet sucked there, so that made it sort of difficult. But we were streaming your stuff, like Pink Floyd stuff and all this, and we were all getting into it. And one of the ones was the Wizard of Oz, and we saw this symbol when Dorothy fell. I mean, I've only seen the movie probably once in my life, so I barely remember it. But when we were watching it, what was Dorothy doing, falling in the bed, Darren?
I think, yeah, the bed was falling. That's right.
And at the end of the fall, this symbol showed up on the screen, and I thought, I wonder if David knows about that thing. And we took us like a half hour of pausing it frame by frame to try and catch the thing.
At least a half an hour, yeah.
Well, I don't know if it was that long, but it was really hard to catch this because it was literally just one frame that was a symbol. So we ended up taking a picture of it, and I sent it to you. And at first, we all thought it was just... Did
you send it to David as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
At first, we all thought it was just normal, like typeset, like a semicolon and an I or a capital or a backslash or something like that. But then guys were looking at it, and they're like, that looks like a cross that's broken off, like... It definitely was like embedded in there for some reason.
Were you guys high or what?
I was.
Not me. I was only sober one there.
No, I see what you're saying. I like the semicolon. You could take it almost like a wink or something. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
I emailed it to you, so take a look.
This was a video that somebody had put together themselves of pairing the Dark Side of the Moon, the Wizard of Oz.
No, from what I can see, it's from the original movie. I think it's from the original movie.
What?
Yes. Crazy. And it was from yours. I think you had it paired, didn't you, David? That one?
Well, that's what really kicked it all off. Back in the day, somebody called up a radio station and dropped that on them, and then it just, it became really popular. And in the, I guess the early 90s, late 80s or something, they used to play it in theaters together.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they would watch that. And so it's interesting because this is one of the biggest challenges of my life is copyright. So now if you try and do that and you want to charge, you can't, you're not supposed to do that. But they considered it an exceptional thing because it falls under the idea of research. And so that's what I'm trying to argue for the work that I'm doing. And I've struggled a lot dealing with hosting sites because people don't unless if you watch it through, it's hard to know what I'm actually doing, because people look at it and they're like, oh, so you paired some music, and it's like, no, the archetypes behind the thing, it's uncanny. Like, everything will sync with everything to some degree or another. If you're listening to freaking, commercials, over the radio, it doesn't matter. Like, things will do that. But I'm really interested in, like, when things have kind of like you have like a concept album, and the concept album will have a certain subtext, and that subtext will often be like understood, by real, the more intense fans. And so, like, you can have that happen where you have a film that has its own subtext, and you have an album that has its own subtext, and if you bring them together, sometimes things will happen, especially in the editing process. You can look at it sometimes and it's just like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, how can this album, when doubled or tripled or quadrupled, how can it, like, you start at the second that it begins and it'll end the second that it ends, like to the second? Like, that's just crazy. So I'm really interested in probability theory, like, it's one thing if you know the Wizard of Oz Dark Side of the Moon, that it does what it does. It's pretty awesome. But it's like the third round when she comes back home and it says home, home again. I like to be here when I can. And the way that it lands, like, completely in sync with her. Be like, if you don't watch it through, you wouldn't know that. So, like, with my films, it's like you can't necessarily watch like 5-10 minutes and then walk away and think you know what it was that I discovered. Although, oftentimes things do fly off the handle right off the bat. But sometimes it's like, the second round will be that much more impressive than the first, and so that gets really interesting. But yeah. So
I didn't realize that. I thought we were watching we went through a bunch of your stuff in the cabin, and then I guess somebody must have brought up Wizard of Oz. Right? I don't know how we got to Wizard of Oz.
I can't remember.
But if you pull up that weird symbol, like, pull it up, and do you have it there, David?
Yeah, I was looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what have you ever seen anything like that? Like, what do you think that is? Like, there's like, it looks like there's a cross broken off. Like, how can that be embedded in the film?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's in the original cut or not. I know that, my mom swears up and down that when she was young and she saw the Wizard of Oz, that it had a different ending than it has now. But she swears that Dorothy gets out of the bed and she's wearing the ruby slippers at the end.
That's too funny.
Like, I don't know. I know that I've gone to see movies in the theater, and then when they were released on video afterwards, they had things changed around. Like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was like that. There was like little bits that the baby had said that just were no longer included and stuff. So I know that can happen. Right. I also know that the same claim has been made by people with the birds, that at the end of Hitchcock's The Birds, when they show up in San Francisco, the birds are like in San Francisco, like it shows you the Golden Gate all covered in birds, and it was a down ending instead of them actually getting away. So I don't know if that's true. It kind of seems like it falls under the Mandela effect, kind of, or not Mandela, excuse me, Mandela. Yeah. That was a Freudian slip. But no, it's well, like there's certain Mandela effect things that really get me, and they're the ones that get me are the ones that don't rely so much on just people having a different memory. Because, like, people will bring up, like, Empire Strikes Back or Field of Dreams and be like, if you build it, they will come, and they insist that it's they and not he. And then they'll be like, it's not, Luke, I am your father. They'd say, that's what it is, but it's not that. It's, no, I am your father. But the thing is that when you ask people that are, like, really intense about those particular two, especially, it's like they can't remember the other lines around what's said. Like, if you could say other lines and you're so, confident on your memory, then I'm more open to it. But it's hard. It's kind of like an Occam's razor thing. I'm like, the simpler explanation is just that they remember it differently because it was popularized by people repeating those key phrases over and over again. But, like, with Field of Dreams, it's about his father. So, like, I got a Field of Dreams sync up right now with Bull Durham and John Fogerty's Center Field. And so the two films came out, like, within a year of each other. And they happen to pair with that album, like, incredibly. And so, like, and they're, like, pretty much the same length. And so both Kevin Costner baseball movies, it's pretty funny. But no, the thing is like, that the father is the context of the movie. He's emphasizing his father. And it's the same with the album. And so there's a repeated reference being made. So it's not just that, okay, well, this is baseball and that's baseball and that's baseball. It's that, no, these actually are communicating the same point around baseball. And so it gets more interesting that way, than just being like, oh, well, what makes for correspondence. That's what theosophy is all about. Theosophy is very similar to Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, like, The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, but it's actually generally pretty empirical. So, like, if they make a reference, they back it up. Whereas like in Morals and Dogma, the quote unquote, Masonic Bible or whatever, they'll make statements and there's no one to back it up other than Albert Pike. And he'll just be like, oh, well, this was secret, so I don't have to.
Yeah. And
that gets kind of ridiculous, as far as I can tell, because it's like, well, because that became the basis for that film Zeitgeist that came out. There's and so like, there was like a whole list of things that they stated, and it came from this one woman who wrote a book called the Christ Conspiracy. I forget her name. I have her book somewhere, but she the only reference that she has stated is Albert Pike, and so it's like it's got no support behind it other than his authority. Yeah. Whereas like Theosophy isn't like that, and so I don't know. But that idea of like where you see a correspondence between two things and you bring them together, and then you can extrapolate more information than you could otherwise. So like. What I'm looking at with the work that I've been doing for 20 years with the album film pairing thing, that I've just been completely obsessed with. It's like the number one thing in my life, is where you're looking at two things that shouldn't necessarily be like I don't know how to say it. Like Crowley has this whole thing in the Book of the Law where he's like the rituals will be half revealed, half concealed, and so there's this idea in the secret, not so secret societies that if you want to move up the grades beyond the known grades, that you have to contribute something to the great work that is seen by all on one level, but then for the inner circle, they get their own thing. And this phenomenon is one of the only ways I could think to do that as far as media is concerned, because you will see things communicated that are really profound, that you wouldn't get from just the album on its own, you wouldn't get from just the film on its own. And so, it's.
Well, Darren and I were talking about that earlier today or yesterday about whether this is intentional or not, or whether we thought that was intentional or not. Like this synchronization, is it just from some other, supernatural source, like connecting things, or is it actually people, that are actually trying to do these little things that are sort of half hidden?
Yeah, I believe it's both. And I think that that's the kicker. Is that to have the intention to do something goes a lot further than most people might assume. Yeah. And so when you look at Jung's book, Synchronicity and a Causal Principle, where he coined the term, most of that book is dealing with like influence, like in consciousness, and like what is the probability for like if somebody's pulling cards from a deck and they're projecting the card that they hope to see, how many cards they'll go through before they land on that card, and the fact that it will repeatedly move in their favor doesn't stand to reason. It's like that doesn't there's no straightforward explanation of that necessarily, but there's definitely something to be said for the right and left hemispheres of the brain. And so what is the basis for which? And so that's how I interpret Crowley's Love is the Law, Love under Will. I feel it's a Kabbalistic joke referencing Jachin and Boaz, the two pillars of the temple. So when those pillars are translated, you say Jachin and Boaz is established in strength. Strength is Oz, by the way, it's Hebrew. So L. Frank Baum was a theosophist, and so he was taking a lot from Blavatsky's work at the time, and other theosophists as well, obviously. But it's actually the pathway that connects the two pillars of the terrestrial together. So you have Chesed and Gevurah are the two Sefirot flanking the Kabbalistic tree in the seven lower worlds. And so, the pathway that connects them is strength in tarot with the arcana. It's Tet in Hebrew, but it's Oz is strength. And so you're looking at what is holding the empire together. So I have this crazy trip out with that guy who connected the wire between the towers. My friend made this film Back to the Future predicts 9/11, and he's looking at this French guy, and I'm just like, that to me is like a really direct example of the principle communicated in the Golden Bough. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the Golden Bough by Fraser from Cambridge, but it's like an anthropological, really, epic book it's huge. It's so many volumes, but it basically shows the ritualistic killing of the king, right? And how it was expressed all around the world. And it's going into like ancient times, speaking to the phenomenon of the scapegoat. So scapegoat in Judaism was kind of a joke. Like if you look at the older texts on that, I've transcribed them with my rabbi, we went through 3 different references in ancient texts to the phenomenon of the scapegoat. And, it's this whole thing where they would take a goat and they take a string and then this red string. And they cut the string in half, and they tie half of it to the goat's leg, and they tie the other half to the temple door. After they kill the goat in 3 days' time, if the string on the door turns white, then it means it's taken their sins with them. You know?
Wow.
And so, but it's funny because like when we were reading this text, I kept on coming across these things that seemed like jokes. Like I was like, is this guy joking? I was like, my rabbi was like, yeah, he's totally joking. And I was like, wow, that's really something, you know, it's not uncommon, you know, when you're looking at, that kind of commentary, you know, with different things, but it was especially so with that. And so, you know, Christianity took that and combined it with the prophecy in the book of, Isaiah, right? And so, and then kind of made it this other thing. But the thing is that like in ancient times, the scapegoat was always guilty. You know, say what you will about Christianity, whether you believe it or not, is not the point. Point is that, objectively speaking, the idea is that this is supposed to be an innocent person that's being killed. And so it's similar to Socrates in a way from Plato, right? So it's like Socrates accepts his fate, he accepts his punishment or whatever, but he's being charged with corrupting the youth, but he's innocent. So now what we're seeing in the world is kind of like, we're looking at people being scapegoated who are like kind of like the epitome of what we maybe shouldn't like about our society, you know. So people, very greedy people, you know, so it's like it's not necessarily a good thing, but it's under the circumstances, it's just where we find ourselves, you know. So we're kind of oriented in this way. So we go after somebody and, you know, we tear them to shreds, and it puts things into perspective in the process. And so, you know, but this phenomenon of where it's also very related to the archetype of the fool. So, you know, in tarot, you have the first arcana, it would correspond to Aleph, you know, so it's the first emanation from the Kabbalistic tree. If you're looking at the 22 pathways of the tree of life and how they relate to tarot, you know, the first alphabet, right? So it's like you have this first movement, it's the fool, you know that the card with the fool, he's going to walk off a cliff or whatever, you know, but it's the spring man, it's the green man, you know. And so they're emphasizing this point in the golden bough around this outsider. The outsider has to have certain credentials. Like he has to be, first of all, of the lowest class, and he has to be a true outsider. He can't be from within the kingdom. And so there was this whole thing that they had in place to ensure the rejuvenation of the bloodline. I don't know if I talked about this last time I was on the show or not, but it's really crucial.
I don't think so.
It's a really profound, crucial point, because it's like, you know, this was in old times, this was how they did things in order to ensure that they wouldn't keep the same bloodline in power for too long because of incest. And, you know, they wanted to keep renewing it. And so they related this to the tree that is the kingdom itself in order to, you know, keep the empire going. And so this is what's communicated through the Kabbalistic tree of life. You're looking at, the Tetragrammaton is actually a family, and that's the understanding of the Sefer Yetzirah. You know, you have a father, a mother, a son, and a daughter. That's Yud, He, Vav, He. And so that expresses itself in the Kabbalistic tree in emanation. So, like, they're relating to things as going from etheric to gross, so things come into form, right? And so, like, so there's two orders to the Kabbalistic tree. There's the formative order. That's the 777 lightning flash for the European occultists, with the way that they attribute the tree. So if you mark out this lightning flash, this zigzag through the tree, through those 22 pathways, those particular pathways that make up the lightning flash total 777. And so there's that order, and that's an organic order. That's like that's the actual formative order. That's what's described in the Sefer Yetzirah. And then there's the sustaining order of the empire, and that relates to Gevurah, severity, the left pillar, the left side of the brain in the terrestrial realm. So that's where the klipot come in. So you have this idea of these influencing intelligences in terms of our perception. And so a lot of the Zohar, the prophecy, the real prophecy is around the nullification of the klipot. Like, it's really misleading when I talk about 9/11 in the Zohar, you know, because I want to point that out, that it makes this prediction and it's demonstratable because it's true. And at the same time, that's not really the prophecy. The prophecy is about consciousness and the evolution of, you know, what we are. Like, it's describing us basically pushing out this child, which is the next species. And so that's pretty far out. AI? Well, I don't take it that way, actually. I mean, you could make an argument that way. I don't really know, but I do know that the thing that is being emphasized, the one attribute of what the next species is that the two hemispheres that have been divided get united.
Oh, wow.
And so it's basically saying that the on a collective level, And this is what 9/11 was made to communicate, made to represent. And it stresses that when the event happens, our right brain knows what it saw, but our left brain has to come to terms with it. And for all intents and purposes, as far as I can tell, it's describing a breakdown in cognitive dissonance. So it's saying that the timeline from when that event happens to the establishment of the one world government that uses this event as a springboard to accomplish its goal. It literally says this, like it has this whole thing that time, that bit of time in human history is the main characteristic of it is a breakdown of the left brain coming to terms with what it saw on that day.
Wow.
And that day is not just like there's all these events that whatever, tragedies or whatever. It's like, like Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy actually goes into the same points. It's really amazing. I could go into that, and that relates to the work that I'm doing with the film album stuff because it's corresponding to the Seder chorus. But
so does that imply that that they're coming to terms with the bullshit story? Or the actual trauma of the event, or seeing the event and being told it's one thing when it's, very clearly can't be the case.
It's describing the way that we've been manipulated over time through these events. And so the reason why it's 9/11 is because that's Tisha B'Av. It's the equivalent in our calendar of the Hebrew date. So it's the 9th day in the 11th month in the Hebrew calendar is Tisha B'Av. So the Zohar gives what appears to be a random date for 2001. And has, but it's not a random date. It's 9/11 in our calendar. And then the commentary from the 16th century from Ramak is what I've transcribed along with the other texts. And that's what's not available to people in English. And so I've spent 3.5 years transcribing that text to make it available to people. But at this point, most of it is just in longhand. But upon request, I'll share it with anybody. I'm more than happy.
Yeah. So does that prophesy this whole cultural and political shift as well, then, with Trump and the 777 and the outsider and all that? Is that what that's talking about?
Trump was elected on, what was it, the 7th? I don't want to get it wrong, but I do know it's something along the lines of like the 70th year, 7th month, 7th day. I think,
something like that. I mean, there's definitely
so that was the 666th month of Obama's life, or what? I forget how that goes.
Yeah, there was some weird thing like that. But I mean, is that
weird thing? Yeah,
is that connected to what you're talking about, or?
But that's the kicker is that so the 666 thing most people don't realize, like that is Gevurah. So if you ever watch the movie Pi, Darren Aronofsky, and they're looking for a 216 digit number in the Torah, that's a joke about the state of Israel, no freaking question, because 216 is the geometrical value of Gevurah. It's 6 times 6 times 6. They divide, add, multiply, understand. And it relates to the 3 pillars of the Kabbalistic tree. So you have the geometrical value of Chesed, mercy, on the right hemisphere. That's 72. You say 72 times 3 is 216. 6 times 6 times 6 is 216. And then that relates to the klipot and the sustaining order of the empire, which you see in the lower worlds. And what maintains that is the diagonal pathways of the Kabbalistic tree. So each one of those pathways, depending on the way that they're facing, is a dimension. So if you're looking at the vertical dimension, that's a different dimension than the horizontal. So Oz, strength, what connects the 2 pillars, that line that the French guy symbolically made, and the fact that he's, I assume, is not aware of this stuff just makes it all the more profound. Just like that kid that climbed the Trump Tower, 21 stories. There's 22 arcana, including the Fool. He's the Fool. He climbed the Trump Tower 21 stories before he got removed. That's the equivalent of pulling the Golden Bough. Just like this French guy. I forget his name. I don't know. His initials are PP, which I find interesting because Pe in Hebrew is the tower in tarot. So his name literally, that guy that made that.
Well, so Pepe's tower?
Yeah, Pepe means 2 towers.
Oh, Jesus, that even.
Yeah.
Oh, we just got fucking labeled alt-right.
Yeah.
I don't think you can even say Pepe anymore.
No.
Right. Well, that's the funny thing too, is that like, so I'll talk about right and left hemisphere and like what's described in Zohar in regards to the 2 pillars. But what they also emphasize is that the left brain projects 2 pillars. But it relates to it on its own terms. It's hard to explain kind of, but this is the thing. It's like a graven image thing, right? So it's like you're wanting to relate to the right side through the left. What you're going to get is a projection of the left's interpretation of the right and not the right itself. And so that's what we're dealing with, is a duality that's on the left brain's terms. And so that's what's breaking down, and that's what the Zohar is describing, and then that's what characterizes the shift in consciousness. So it's saying that basically that the last thing we see shift is the dense side of the manifestation. So because everything's about emanation in Zohar, not just Zohar. That's true for all mysticisms. If you go deep enough, you'll always find this principle of emanation emphasized. And so it's like you can't have a discussion about religion with anybody, or at least mystical religion, without acknowledging the principle of emanation, etheric to gross, and what that means. So basically, yeah.
So this is a combination of it's a spiritual and consciousness shift into the middle, like your left and right brain through, like, let's say some sort of spiritual middle ground with, I don't know, I don't want to get into the details of that. And then there's the cultural shift as well, left and right merging into one, and
right.
that both happening at once, you think?
Well, basically what it's saying is that following this event, even though it's been happening before, but it's like a exponential type of thing, where basically the left on a collective level thinks it's going to conquer the right. And so what it's describing is this movement towards a one world government is its attempt to do that. And that basically, but it's just saying that like everything that we're seeing along the way seems to point to like the ultimate tragedy, right? But it's saying that like when we actually reach the crescendo, when we reach the zenith point, it relates it as a sex act actually. And also the giving birth. It's, it has all kinds of different metaphors, analogies that it's working around. But it's saying that it's basically like it describes a teeter-totter, because it's saying that there's a pin and then with this pathway, and that we're leaning to go to try and, it describes it as like essentially two fish. So the left fish thinks it's going to swallow the right fish. And when it actually goes over to make its move, it realizes that the thing that it thinks it's going to conquer and swallow is actually its own foundation. So it's describing a pyramid, essentially, and an eye at the top of the pyramid, because it has this whole thing from the Ba here where it's saying that Gavora is communicated as a big red eye. And I'm just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Like, how? And so I'm like, so it's the left brain, right? What is how? HAL 9000, 2001, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I could go on with that shit for days. I mean, you realize, like, Stanley Kubrick died 666 days before 1101, exactly. Stanley Kubrick died 666 days after the first computer beat a man at chess. The computer that beat the man at chess was built by IBM, which was admittedly modeled after HAL from 2001. And the thing where like HAL is each letter removed from IBM.
Yeah.
And so, Arthur C. Clarke in one of his books talking about 2001 says he was gifted a computer by Macintosh to determine probability. And he said the probability for that to happen, for IBM to be each one letter removed, would be 6 cubed. So though he says it's a coincidence, so I'm just like, what is a coincidence? I mean, that's the big kicker, is that like what this really comes down to, and from what I gather, is that it's the profundity of us discovering numbers. So like we didn't invent numbers. We didn't invent math. Like math is already. We invented the symbols to communicate the thing and to work with the thing. But the thing itself is very much alive. And that's the significance of the Babylonian Sun Square, too. So there's tricks you can do with the Babylonian Sun Square that most people don't even know about. Even people who know how freaking weird it is. I don't know if you're familiar. You got a grid, a 6x6 grid. There's ones for all the planets, but it's the oldest mathematics we have on the planet, as far as I know. If you add up the numbers in any direction, you get 111. So you add them together, you get 666. So that's the Babylonian Sun Square, 666. That's the equation. But if you fold the thing into a cylinder, there's a trick you can do where if you go in steps, I think, what is it? Northwest, return to the garden, it's symbolic, right? So there's that thing where if you divide Yitzchayim with Kedem, where Adam and Eve leave the garden, they're the 9th and 10th numbers of the Fibonacci sequence, and so if you divide them, you get the golden spiral. So they say that in pi, but they're misleading because they say that it's Eden, when it's not just Eden that they're using to do that. It's actually where Adam and Eve exit the garden. But anyways, the point is if you go in that other direction, you go in these steps, each number will be the next number in the sequence in a diagonal. And so this is supposed to relate to the diagonal pathways, because this is a template of the Tower of Babel, which is why when you see paintings of the Tower of Babel, it's always communicated as this crazy spiral, and they reproduce that. Where was the giant building that they, I should know that, derp. But anyways, yeah, it's this phenomenon where and then you go the next line over and you can keep doing the same thing. You can basically use the Babylonian Sun Square to make this crazy infinite spiral thing. And that's pretty amazing.
Well, then didn't they find an ancient numbering system that's, you know, how we use 1 to 10, and that's the basis of how we count? I mean, you could do it differently, right? You could have a different calendar, a different thing, and this numbering system goes back to before Babylonia, I think, with the sixes, and they were using it as a six-based numbering system, I think.
Right. Well,
6 and 12, and
the thing is like with the original alphabet. So the Hebrew alphabet and where it came from the pictographs, the Phoenician and the Chaldean and all of that, you can see developmentally the way we move further and further from the right brain and towards the left. So this is what language is. And so the Tower of Babel collapsing and no one being able to understand each other's speech is even more profound than most realize, like, because the whole point is that we used to speak in math. So like math, we didn't relate to the same way that we do now. Math was not left brain; it was as much right brain. And so, but the thing is that the right brain can't dominate. The whole idea of dominance is a left brain idea. So that's why you have severity and mercy, chesed and gevurah, right? And this is then mathematically they're communicating. Like, so it's crazy. Like there's this whole. It sounds unbelievable, but there's this amazing Stanley Kubrick connection. Because, like, Stanley, so I'll drop some really weird shit on you guys if you're interested.
Well, he probably faked the moon landings.
Yeah, the battery's dying there.
Oh, you got some technical difficulty?
Yeah, it's like 1%, or can you hover over that battery symbol there? I just want to make sure something's not going to just...
Oh, sure. You can edit this afterwards, so we're not live or anything.
No, we're good. We're good. Just keep going.
Okay. All right, so yeah, ready to be blown away again.
Okay, so there's this whole thing where basically I was looking at Stanley Kubrick presented MGM with a script for Napoleon way back when, whether the 70s or whatever. And MGM turned down the script. And over them turning it down, he left excuse me, did I say IBM? No, he left MGM over this thing where they wouldn't do his Napoleon movie. Well, 4 months later, production started for a movie called Waterloo.
So I watched this recently from yours. I've still got ABBA in my head.
Right. That'll happen. I got an
It's
ABBA tattoo yesterday. I don't know if you can see that, but yeah.
It's been like 3 days, and the funny thing is I've got songs that I've never heard from ABBA stuck in my head.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Most people have a conception of ABBA too. Like they know the more popular songs. So I got family in Sweden, and I was there recently, and I go into the ABBA museum and all this stuff, and my cousin just thinks it's a riot because he fucking hates ABBA. He's like, had to be raised with ABBA. He's like, oh God, but he doesn't realize all their back catalog and what's going on because they are dealing with some trippy stuff. So I made that 7.5 hour film. Sorry, Cassandra, I misunderstood. Everything Predicts 9/11. That's an ABBA reference from their last album. So it's Cassandra in Greek legend is able to, prophesy an event, but it's also a curse because nothing she can do can stop the event from happening. It's like Jay-Z's A Gift and a Curse. Incidentally, Jay-Z came out with the blueprint on 9/11, 2001. That was its release date. And if you take that album and you start it from the second that in the movie the World Trade Center by Oliver Stone. At the beginning, when Nicolas Cage hits his alarm clock, it's the very first thing to happen. It's the first scene. If you start the album on that second, when he hits the alarm clock, it'll end the second that the film ends, doubled. So it twins.
No way.
Yeah, way. It's fucking crazy. And so
you
that's
gotta
the thing.
play it twice?
Yeah.
Yeah, you loop it. And so if there's no gap, if you just do it straightforward, that's what happens. And so there's a lot of examples in my films, my experiments, where it lands that way. And they can all be recreated. And that's the thing, because I'll have people be like, "Oh, come on, you warped it." I'm like, "No, I swear to fucking God, that look at it, look for yourself. That's what it is."
Well, even the ABBA in the Waterloo movie. So it was really weird watching this Napoleon Waterloo movie because I don't think I've ever seen that, but it was quite the epic film. Actually, it was like a real interesting war movie. And ABBA's playing in the background, and even a lot of the songs would end during a scene change, and it would shift over to it seemed like a song that was suited for that scene change.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. And the more you look into it, the more you'll see that there's something happening with probability there that's just out of control. And it's also the timing in which the album came out following the film. It's uncanny that like Stanley Kubrick would be turned down for his script. I went to the ABBA Museum twice in San Francisco recently, not the ABBA Museum. Jesus Christ, I need to stop drinking this beer. I went to the fucking Stanley Kubrick exhibit at the Jewish Museum in San Francisco twice recently, and they had scripts there, and I'm just like, where's the freaking Napoleon script? Because like basically at this point, I'm like, and I thought this anyway. I was like tripping out. I was like, wait a minute. 4 months later, this movie, and so I hadn't seen the movie yet when I was looking into this, and then I'm like, wait a minute, this is written by this guy Hal Craig, and so it's H.A.L. Craig.
No way.
And so I'm looking into this guy, and I'm starting to find weird stuff, and I'm just like, wait a minute, and I'm not even sure. I'm like, is this even a real person? And so like for real, like I don't know. And so, like, while I'm in the middle of looking, I find this weird thing where basically he wrote a movie called The Message that was, it's like the birth of Islam. And so I forget the year, I should know this, but at a certain point there was a hostage situation in Washington when it's March 9th. I think 1977. Don't quote me on that. But okay. Anyways, the point is that this happened on March 9th. They were releasing this film, The Message, and these people took 149 hostages, these quote unquote Islamic terrorists, to keep this film from coming out. And that was one of their demands, one of their biggest demands. And because they, supposedly thought it was going to picture Muhammad, which it doesn't, which is really weird. How you have this Birth of Islam movie without Muhammad. But anyways, so the siege takes place from the 9th to the 11th of March of that year. And so I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, so this is after the fact. So I'm tripping out over freaking ABBA and how Craig doing this Waterloo thing. Waterloo. Okay. And what actually happens there. And so I was like, okay, well, this is weird. What happens if I play the ABBA album that came out right around the same time as The Message? And it turns out if you start it the second that the film begins, on the second, it'll end the second that the film ends after 4 rounds. To the fucking second.
Wow.
And so I'm like, I haven't tried the album with anything else. I didn't try the film with anything else. I did this strictly for symbolic purposes. And I'm like, what the hell? And the things that it communicates are pretty pronounced. So it's, especially with what's happening with Sweden right now. And so that gets really interesting. But anyway, so the point is I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, well, that's the 9th. And then I'm looking at this guy's other films. He hasn't written that many films. But one of the other films that he did was released on the 11th of that same month. And it's called Airport 77. So yeah, this took place in 1977. And so in 77, you have the 9th of March and the 11th of March being, the length of this hostage situation. And then it turns out that those 2 dates are bookended as 2 release dates for a film about the birth of Islam and a film about a plane hijacking by terrorists.
Well, and 9/11.
That's what I'm fucking saying, dude. I'm like, what? And then I'm like, is this Hal Craig guy freaking Stanley Kubrick? Not to say that he is Stanley Kubrick, but like, it seems as though that Kubrick's Napoleon script is this film Waterloo. And so, whether he just used his, this guy as a cover or whatever, I don't know. But I also find it really weird that The Message and the Airport 77 are like, dramatically different films. They're written in entirely different ways. You wouldn't assume these have the same writers, And so I'm looking into this, right? I'm going super deep, and I keep looking at this guy Hal Craig's page over and over again on Wikipedia, and it disappears completely. So he no longer has a Wikipedia page.
No way.
And then not only that, but on those other films, like Airport 77 and The Message and stuff, I know for a fact that there were sections in those pages that are no longer there that disappeared the same time that his whole page disappeared.
Holy fuck.
Right.
So does that mean
yes.
But there's a lot of implications there, it seems like there's no way that could be by design.
I don't know. It's like if you look at Scott Onstott's work, I don't know if you're familiar, Secrets in Plain Sight, he's a friend of mine. He produced this amazing web series, and it's like he'll be going along and he's measuring across the planet and finding these like extremely profound correspondences But then it'll start to get into the point where he's like measuring the continents themselves, exactly. And it's like, and what shows up is just like mind blowing. It's like, okay, well, wait a minute. We didn't plan that. Who can you, like, that's the thing. I can tell you Stanley Kubrick died 666 days in both directions like that. And it's like, that's freaking so on point and crazy and over the top. But it's like, did he plan that? I don't know. But I'll tell you something that I do think is planned. And this is relating back to the Golden Bough thing, is Bohemian Grove. So the infiltration of Bohemian Grove by Alex Jones, that was not Alex Jones's project.
That was Ron Johnson, wasn't it?
You know it. Yeah, that's right. And so Ron Johnson, at the time that he did that, he was the only man in the world with complete access to all of Stanley Kubrick's archives. This is demonstrated, as a matter of fact, by the documentary Kubrick's Boxes. And so Stanley Kubrick died, in 1999, and the last request of his life, as far as films go, was the release date of Eyes Wide Shut. I found that in interviews from people where they say he was specific about this day. So I'm looking into, well, what about this day? So I don't see anything significant that year, but I'm like, a year to the day was the cremation of care that was caught on camera. How is it that the film that has like the closest depiction of elite ritual parties filmed at the Rothschilds' mansion came out a year to the day of the filming of Bohemian Grove, and that the man who was in charge of the project was the only man in the world with complete access to all of Kubrick's archives?
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And the way he plays that down right now, too, makes sense. Like that sort of fits the whole thing. Because I heard him talking about it recently as well, and he just doesn't give Alex and that whole experience enough credit, I don't think.
Oh, dude. Yeah, well, that's the thing. So in a sense, if you entertain that idea, you could say that Stanley Kubrick got Trump elected, because all the people that were into the whole conspiracy shit, who trusted Alex Jones because he hated George Bush and he hated Obama and he hates all these people, he's made an exception for Trump. And so, all these people were like, oh, well, shit, if Alex is about him, then he's got to be a genuine variable. And he is a genuine variable in a sense. As far as I can tell, what Trump is he is like a direct reflection. So this is, okay, I have to back up a little bit to give context.
You better back up slow. Because there's a lot of
yeah. I know, I'm jumping the gun, but I'll tell you some shit. Okay, so Stanley Kubrick was obsessed with the Golden Bough. He has said this himself. People have said this in interviews about him. So Stanley Kubrick sent the head of Warner Brothers in the 1970s an unabridged set of the Golden Bough, and he bugged him every week for a year about reading it. And the guy, the head of Warner Brothers, eventually said to Stanley, look, I don't have time for mythology. To which Kubrick replied, this isn't mythology, this is your life.
Wow.
The whole point of the Golden Bough is the outsider who pulls this branch from a sacred tree at a lake called Nemi. It's Diana's mirror, right? It's what Princess Di is named after, right? So the outsider pulls this branch, which is symbolic of two things. It's symbolic of the king's phallus, which is the strength of the kingdom, right? And it's symbolic of the king's daughter. And so he's challenging the king. So they would do it different ways. Sometimes it would be an actual fight. So like if he, he has to take out the king, he has to prove himself. But sometimes it'd be almost more like ritualistic, where the king would commit suicide. So that's where the symbolism of the suicide king comes from. That's the origin, the origin of that whole thing. And it's a willing sacrifice to rejuvenate the kingdom, to allow some new, fresh blood to come in. And he had to be of the lower classes because he would turn everything on his head. He'd basically make the last
the outsider, right?
Right. And so what you're looking at when you're looking at Bohemian Grove, as far as I can tell, is a exact reproduction of the Golden Bough ritual at the Lake of Nemi. Except instead of them doing the way that they used to do it, they're celebrating that they're putting it off. So they say midsummer sets us free, and they burn the effigy. As far as I can tell, the effigy that they're burning, considering what they say, fools, is supposed to be the fool outsider who would challenge the king. Wow. And so they're like basically celebrating, yeah, fuck you, we're keeping it in the family. And so what you have then is this, it's because the two orders of the Sphirot. So that relates to the 666 order, left brain deal, where they're like, we can hold this empire together the way that we want to, right? But the thing is, like, the old ritual was its purpose was to align with the natural processes of the seasons, a recognition of cycles. So they need to allow this thing to take place in order to allow the thing to keep going. And so, this is what befalls empires when they refuse to allow this thing to happen and they get greedy. And so as far as I can tell, what Trump is he is that outsider. He is that archetype, but he's like a twisted version of it. He's like a mutated version of it because they put it off for so long that this is the way that it manifests.
What year was that?
So, the Bohemian Grove, you mean? Or?
Yeah. Like 2000, mid 2000s?
Yeah, that was 2000. Yeah, midsummer. Yeah.
Oh, 2000 itself.
Well, I can tell you the date if I look up the release date of Eyes Wide Shut.
No, it's okay. I just wasn't sure of how long. I feel like it was like, I don't know how long ago it was. It feels like it was one of those things.
Let's test the AI.
So,
hey, Siri, what was the release date of Eyes Wide Shut?
Eyes Wide Shut was released the 9th of September, 1999.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That should.
Yeah. Right. That's almost exactly, what is it, September, 6 right now? Damn. So, So, and Lake Nemi, is that the one we did the episode on? Darren, is that the lake in
if it was
Italy?
Randomly the day? I would have.
Did you really do an episode on Lake Nemi?
I think
July 16th, 1999 is what IMDb says.
Oh, okay.
And that is it.
Series suck. Series wrong again.
Turns out again.
So Lake Nemi, Darren, isn't that the one we did the episode in Italy with that guy? It was really interesting. That old lake in
that does sound familiar.
In Italy with the boats and the yeah.
How do you spell that?
Nemi, I think.
Yeah. Nemi, yeah. So yeah, I recommend the Golden Bough to anybody to check out. But it also, if you look at the commentary on the full and Crowley's,
let's see if there's a crazy implication to this number.
Okay.
Our episode on Italian Strega, Lake Nemi, and Giants was episode 184, and it came out on August 26, 2016. Nothing?
Pretty close.
Nothing.
It's like the lottery, but we missed.
Close.
Yeah. Right. It must have been fit. Well, that's the thing, I'll look at films that like come out really close to each other. So like, even though 2001: A Space Odyssey and Rosemary's Baby, they're the exact same length, the two films, but there's something crazy about if you have to start it if you start at the Dawn of Man in 2001. So if you start Rosemary's Baby as the Dawn of Man, they'll be the exact same length. They'll end at the same time. But there's a thing where one is representing the sustaining order. You have the Antichrist in Rosemary's Baby, and then you have the Messiah in 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you take the screen titles of 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Dawn of Man, Jupiter Mission 18 Months Later, and Jupiter Beyond the Infinite, and you work out the English gematria of that, it'll total 777. And as you go through the film, you're literally, the correspondences to the spheroid of the Tree of Life in order are what you're moving through. So when you get to Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite, that's Da'at. So you have knowledge, right? So that's what separates the supernal from the terrestrial. And that's why at the end, the star child returns to Earth, is because it's the roots or its branches in the Kabbalistic tree. So there's this whole thing going on there. They're communicating the two orders of the spheroid. And so you have, in a sense, best case scenario, in a sense, worst case scenario, So, and also like Rosemary's Baby. Yeah, Rosemary's Baby is also referencing Roe versus Wade, it seems. And you look at the timing in which it came out, and that they call Rosemary Roe, and so you have this whole weird idea where it's like, okay, so we're giving birth to the next species, but is it going to be fucking aborted or something? It gets really, really heavy. Because that's what Polanski did, He makes the heaviest tragedies imaginable because his life is a fucking insane tragedy. He survived the Holocaust, and then his wife was, murdered, and then he, got himself into a whole heap of trouble that is extremely common in Hollywood. It was Jack Nicholson was a regular with the prostitution ring, and he hooked him up. It was at Jack's house, and it's like it's the whole thing is just it's so weird because it's a scapegoat phenomenon, right? But it's like, that's the thing, is like the old scapegoat was always guilty. The Christianity is supposed to be the innocent scapegoat, and so now everyone's coming together to fucking sacrifice the what they see as the epitome of the problem, and it's very poignant symbolically to say the least. Especially, what's happening, because if you look at Crowley's Saudi is not the star issue, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's like that was the basis for my film, because I'm looking at if you arrange the 22 arcana, corresponding to the 22 Hebrew letters, the trump cards in tarot, into a Vesica Piscis, We have 11 and 11, right? If you do it normally, it'll be flanked by Aleph and Lamed. So that's El, as in the abbreviation of Elohim. So you have the name of God encoded into the 22 letters. If you do what Crowley suggested to do with his version of the deck, you have Sadi is not the star. So he did the switch. But then if you move all the cards over in relationship to what he presents, you end up with another type of symmetry. And so it doesn't have the same perfection as the initial, but it's like imitating it. So you have Reish on one side, and then you have Tet on the other. And so Reish is the sun, Tet is lust or strength or Oz, right? And so you have, and that's corresponding to Leo. So you have the sun and Leo. The sun rules Leo. So, and then you have the Babylonian sun square, and he Crowley call himself 666 and all of this stuff. It's relating to Gavora. And so, yeah, that gets really interesting because it's like what happens when you do that twist too, is you can see that because the emperor is being moved from the empress. So he's separating the two lovers of the empress and the emperor. So they would normally be looking at each other. And this relates to, in the Zohar, the whole thing around Sadi is supposed to be two faces. So they're either facing each other or they're facing away. And so when she's replaced by the star card, and the star card, the character in Crowley's star card is looking away from her. So she's going to look at her lover, and then she's getting basically Lilith, and Lilith is turned away, and that would be her bridge to the Hierophant, because the He, which would correspond to the Emperor, means window. So he's like her window into the higher knowledge to the Hierophant. But now it's blocked by the star. And so, but the thing the significant point is that when you do that switch that Crowley has, you have the Emperor right next to the Tower. And so the Emperor now being equated with Sadi rather than He means fishhook. So and then the Tower, He, is a mouth. So you have a fishhook next to a mouth. And it just so happens that the Emperor is Aries, while the Tower is Mars. Mars rules Aries. So you have the correspondences flanking it, being in alignment, being in sync, but then you have that also being in sync. But the thing is that sync is forced. So like it's just like the septogram, the 7-pointed star. You don't have the equilibrium that you'd have with a hexagram. Like there's that whole thing with the hexagram. If you have the I Ching, right, is made of 64 hexagrams. So it's showing you every possible combination within a single 6-figure set. What happens if you basically squeeze 6 straight lines and 6 broken lines into a single figure? And so it's showing you every way that can play out. That's what the I Ching is. So it's, what is the probability? But it's a principle that's communicating what happens when you introduce a distortion into perfect balance. Because the thing about a hexagram is that every vector within the figure is the exact same length. So they'll have this law of compensation operate. So if you introduce distortion into any one place, it'll react from all sides. So you can predict in a way the way that things will play out. And so this is the reason why people equate it so much with like fortune telling. But it's really misleading the way that's been popularized, because that's not necessarily what it's saying. And then tarot directly comes from that and is relating itself to the Kabbalistic tree, which itself is a set of vectors. But in this case, it's 2 hexagrams that are pulled apart. So you're basically looking at the equivalent of the dynamics of cell division. So if you're looking at the 1 becomes 2. And so this is a separation. So in Hebrew, you say to create is the same word to divide. So something stands out in space, it has to divide in order to do so, because it's all relative, right? And so, this is the thing about a septogram, is that it's only a relative balance, so it can maintain itself for so long. So that's why it became a symbol for Babel from the OTO, is because they're looking at this, and they're saying, well, this is a really descriptive way of what we're dealing with here. And so, this is just, the point is that there's these 2 orders, and one is the foundation for the other. So the 216 order, through the 12 diagonals. See, this is a thing. Last time I was on the show, I didn't finish one thought. I re-listened to one part of it, and I was like, oh shoot, I can't believe I didn't say that. Okay. I'll tell you the meaning of the Masonic G if you want to hear it.
Yeah.
So this is pretty indisputable, and it's fucking mind-blowing. And I got it from the prophecy in Zohar. So it said to do this thing. And it's like, if you want to understand this point about Gavora and this pathway of what we now say strength or Oz, right, that connects the 2 pillars, look to what happens when you add up the 12 diagonal pathways of the Kabbalistic tree mathematically. And so I'm looking at the gematria of the 12 diagonals, and I don't use the Ari system. I use the Golden Dawn system. And even though this text that I'm looking at is commentary from the 16th century, I was curious of what would happen with the current model, right? So the attribution of the letters in relationship to the pathways. And so I add them up and I get 865. 865 is nothing significant. But then it's really obvious when you're looking at it what to do next, because the line of Gimel, which is G, that connects Keter to Tiferet, which connects the crown to the center of the tree, right? The supernal to the terrestrial. It's a vertical line. Mm-hmm. If you add that, that's 3. It equals 868. 868 pretty much only equals one thing in Hebrew. Well, everything that it equals is profound, but it only equals 3 things, I think. I thought it only equaled 1 in the first source that I looked at, but since then I found a couple others, but they're equally, well, not equally, but they're also profound. But the point is, 868 is the gematria value of the 22 mystical pathways, the word for the pathways from the first line of the Sefer Yetzirah.
Wow.
And so the probability for that, I don't know. That would have to be in the millions, at least. I can't even fathom it. So it tells me to do this thing. And when I do the thing, I see what to do next. And I know that anybody who would be working it out, who knows a little bit about the Kabbalistic tree, would see how to follow that. Because you're like, okay, well, you got 12 and then you got 1. There's 12 plus 1. I'm like, this is ancient. This ultimately comes from Egypt. I mean, it could come from elsewhere before that. That'll upset certain Jews, but that's okay. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's Egyptian. Just like you couldn't say that the hexagram is like a Jewish symbol, and then if someone wants to say, oh well, it was in India long before it was a Jewish symbol, you couldn't say that it's an Indian symbol. It's not. It doesn't belong to any group. It's an archetypal symbol, and so the Kabbalistic tree is the same way. And I think that becomes problematic when people are dealing with symbolism. I'm finding it amazing that some of the most symbol illiterate people are the people that get the most hung up on symbols. Tear down the statues, fucking A. Sorry. So anyways, no, so this point is that when you're looking at that, you're saying that the 12 diagonals, if you know your Kabbalah, that's how the Klipot rule the terrestrial realm. That's the builders, right? That's how the builders work, what they're working with. And so you have this verse, the stone that the builders rejected will be the keystone of the temple. And so that's relating to Shekinah, the sacred feminine. So saying the sacred feminine has been pushed to the bottom of the tree as Malkut, and then that suppression, that repression becomes the basis for which the empire is able to structure itself. And so then the strength of the kingdom, that's why it's represented in tarot as the maiden with holding the mouth of the lion, right? So it becomes a question of what is strength. And so what Zohar is emphasizing, and this is a lot of what people think like the Zohar is, all about secrecy. It's not. It's very rare you see a reference to secrecy. All you see is mystery. And so it's an open secret. And so that changed with the European occultism, and that changed over time. Even for Jews, that changed. And that's why I say Darren Aronofsky's film Pi was kind of an attack on things, because he's saying, look, you're looking for a 216 number. You're looking for the name, but you already have the name. You know the name. The name is 22 letters long. It's the language itself, arranged straightforward. There's nothing else to do. So that's the thing, if you twist it or manipulate it anyway, then you end up with some version of Babel. So, and the problem with that is that that it's certain people are going to end up on top, and certain people, the energy distribution is funneled in particular ways. And so it's a manipulative thing. So they're saying you're going to have to deal with the karma of that if you go and you do that, for lack of a better word. Yeah, so
speaking of that, the twisted outsider, Trump, so this is like after in 2000 when they had that Bohemian Grove and said, fuck you to the outsider, and they're going to wait. And then this came along 16 years later. Right. I kind of cut you off when you were in the midst of finishing that thought about. No,
the only thing that I would say is that the main point of that, if you're looking at that and you know your stuff and you see that 868 thing with Gimel, is that because that belongs to another dimension than the diagonals, because that's a vertical, that's a direct connection between the mind of God and the mind of humanity. And it negates the whole system. It's demonstrating where the true power lies. And so, just so you know, and you can, verify this yourself, but it's the implications of the thing. It's like it's hard to relay irony, right? Like I can say something's ironic, but if somebody doesn't see the irony, it's kind of like, okay. But anyways, so the whole thing is that they're not in control. Their own Masonic G implies that they aren't in control. The square in the compass represents the supernal triad, Keter, Chokhmah, and Bina. And below, you have Tiferet, Gevurah, and Chesed. And so that's what makes up the square and the compass. And then what connects them is this vertical dimension. And it that belongs to a different order. It's the medial brain is literally what they say in Zohar. That's the direct translation when they're relating to Keter, So you have this transcendent thing in the midst. And in tarot, the G would be equated with the high priestess, right? That's why she has Yakin and Boaz on both sides of her, and traditionally in the rider deck, right? So and she's holding the Torah, So that's the point of that, and that's why she has the C behind her. That's the C of Bina. This is consciousness. Consciousness becomes rivers. It starts out vast and then it gets confined. And so they're saying this could just flood, but because of our orientation, because of our compulsions, the emanated flow is restrained. And so, and then you have to have a breakdown in order to, set that free.
Yeah, well, that seems like it's coming. So what about back to that Waterloo movie? So can you mention a few more interesting tidbits about ABBA and the album and that movie?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's basically, as far as I can tell, the whole thing is like this crazy, massive joke. So like, so if you've ever seen Dr. Strangelove, that was. Is there a new Doctor? Oh, no, you're thinking of Doctor Strange. I'm talking about Kubrick's Doctor Strangelove, released on the day and year Kennedy was killed and then had to be canceled. Interesting, that was the same day that the Beatles produced With the Beatles. You have Meet the Beatles was the American version. With the Beatles was the UK version. So day and year that Kennedy was killed, they released that. On the 5th year anniversary, they released the White Album. But anyways, point. I go tangents. The Waterloo thing. When you're looking at Dr. Strangelove, it's one of the few times that Kubrick has outright admitted a subtext. So he was receiving a letter from a guy who was basically suggesting that all of Dr. Strangelove was a sexual metaphor. And it's about sexual frustration and psychology. So you're looking at at Russia and America as though that they were individuals that are experiencing sexual frustration. And so that's the whole thing with the bodily fluids. They're trying to take our precious bodily fluids or whatever. And that the nuclear holocaust at the end of the film, when the guy rides the bomb, that's supposed to be orgasm. So it's like you're putting it off and putting it off. But the thing is that this is pretty trippy, but in Zohar, they have this whole thing with the Klipot mirror tetragrammaton. So everything's in reverse. So anything that would be creative is then replicated destructively. So even like you look at Full Metal Jacket, when it says, this is my rifle, this is my gun, this one's for shooting, this one's for fun, and they're grabbing their crotch or whatever while they're holding their gun, because this becomes their phallus is something that's destructive now. So that's the principle of sublimation, is that everything goes in reverse. So like Freud took his stuff from Zohar, no freaking question as far as I'm concerned. As far as I can tell, one of his big frustrations with Jung was Jung wasn't Jewish. And he's not, he's in Vienna in the time that he's there. But if they were to just say where they were getting what they were getting in the psychoanalytic society, they would have been shut down. There's no way they would have been allowed to continue to exist if they said this is Jewish mysticism. My God. And so they basically had to navigate that as best they could. And so that's why like Freud is telling Jung to shut the hell up when he's saying, oh, I got this from such and such place. But Jung doesn't have as much to worry about because he's not in the same position as Freud. If you get, what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so, but that's the thing is that you see in Waterloo is it's all like, you can see it anyway, like it's the way that the thing is written, but it becomes so much more pronounced with ABBA. As weird as it sounds, it's like it's a real thing where like basically like the song Waterloo is totally from the perspective of Josephine. So Josephine, with Napoleon, he's off at war, he's doing his thing, and she has to surrender to the situation. But there's this whole like, what would you call it? It's like there's a whole homoerotic thing going on with the film Napoleon, and then it's just played into with ABBA in this really extreme way. But it becomes this whole statement about the nature of war and the principle of sublimation, that basically war is super gay. Because people trying to prove themselves in all these ways. So it's like, I've seen that firsthand, like driving a taxi cab. So like I've like picked like bros up, and they're all talking about all the pussy they're gonna get on the way to the place, So I'm like driving them to a bar or whatever. Oh, I'm gonna, and it's okay, cool, whatever, dude, And then like it'll be like those same people at the end of the night are the people that get in fights. Because if they're not getting it this way, then they feel the need to prove themselves. And so, like, this whole thing of, like, sexual frustration. And so that's what Dr. Strangelove is about, overtly and admittedly. And as far as I can tell, that's what he did with Waterloo. So, and then Abba responded by emphasizing the point that much further. And so, I don't want to, like, tell people that because I want them to realize it for themselves, because the people that have and then get back to me, it fucking cracks me up. And I'm like, you got it. You see it. It's totally there.
And then you're connecting that to, like, current day in Sweden as well, then? Or some
I think
sort of, like...
what's happening in Sweden is really interesting because, I was told all these things before I was left about the no-go zones and all this stuff and the tension, the racial tension, all this stuff. I didn't see any of that. I saw some economic tension. And what I found out in Stockholm was that from all these people, I've talked to, 1,000 people about this stuff. And they were just like, it's mostly the people from the countryside who are really having an issue with immigrants, So all these refugees, Sweden just opened their doors more than almost anywhere in the world, and it was just like, and they're not really seeing as much, like the way that that's being portrayed is like so propaganda based. That is not the reality of what I came across in Sweden. And the tension is not, I saw way more tension with the Finnish people than I did Muslims. Because someone took out a knife at one point and was swinging at this guy and like almost hit me, like they were running, and like it was like in the middle of this courtyard in Stockholm, and it scared the hell out of me.
Finnish guy?
And then 2 Finnish guys at each other with swords,
knives.
basically.
Jesus.
They weren't just knives. They were like real swords. Like they were like, they looked homemade, but they were impressive. I was like, damn. And like,
you call this a knife? I call this a knife.
Yeah, total crocodile Dundee. But anyways, yeah, no, that was the most intense thing that happened. And I didn't see much frustration from anybody. I didn't hear it voiced. And it didn't seem like it was just being repressed. It was just like, no, people were very, very expressive about what they thought about what was going on. And I find it really interesting because I think it's true in this country too, is that a lot of the people who are the most concerned about the refugees are generally people who aren't dealing with refugees straight on. So it's like, we got 1% of our country is Muslim. Of that 1%, that makes up 10% of our doctors. Like, there's some really skewed perceptions. And I'm not saying that it's like absolute in any one direction. I'm not saying that there's not things that are problematic. I would like to see things done in the right way. I think Sweden could have done things a bit differently, but I do think that they've kind of taken a stand in terms of how compassion, and I think if you just respond to something that's got futility involved, especially when you're partially responsible, your country's responsible, I think I don't think it's right to just be like, oh, well, fuck them, I don't, how did we get here? I'm sorry, but we're all refugees.
I think social media and the media itself, and even alternative media, it just really shows a picture that's not really happening in day-to-day life for the most part. I mean, we go around day to day, and I don't know. I mean, I know it's probably like that in the States as well. I think it's really just fear mongering, and it's just exaggerating this perception that's not really there. Or it's like just even talking about the racism in the States. Like, I don't think there's that much. Of course, there's some, but there's not that much racism going on compared to what you would think from the media and the social media. It's just blowing it out of proportion.
What the basis for it is too, it's like people, economics plays into it pretty heavy, and that's usually unconscious, and that's the way to get people to, react against people in the way that, people who stand to profit, stand to profit. So it's like, that's the old principle, divide and conquer,
Yeah, totally.
But I don't want to speak about these things in absolute terms. I'm making generalizations, because I think that can be a bit misleading, and that's been a real problem. That's part of the divisiveness of what we've seen through this whole, the campaign process. I mean, every time we come around, this is just that much more emphasized, this whole disjoint that exists between our side and the other side. And it's like, dude, you're guys are exuding the same dynamics in certain ways, and it's the whole backdoor phenomenon from all sides is so apparent. So it's like, but for me, I look at all of that as messed up as it is because of my studies. I see it as a very positive thing. It's a breakdown of the cognitive dissonance that has to do with our relationship to polarity. So we're projecting a duality on top of the polarity. So the Kabbalistic tree is communicating this polarity in the formative order of the Sphirot. But the sustaining order of the empire projects a duality from the left onto the right in order to build what we're building in the way that we're building it. And so, that's why the Zohar is extremely positive. Like, it's not like just a fire and brimstone thing, because you're like, well, what's on the other side of this? And the only indicator is that the two hemispheres become united, and that the left doesn't understand it. It can't recognize what it means, because basically its own foundation is where the true power lies.
Yeah.
The true power is actually beyond both, but just in the relativity, because it's basically the Kabbalistic tree is describing the spiral. So it goes from right to left. And so when it curls around, the left is replicating the right. So our left brain is a replication of our right brain. This was communicated by who was it? Brian Eno at one point. I included that in my film, the Cassandra film, where he's basically saying that you got if you had like a Jackson Pollock painting, and you're looking at that Jackson Pollock painting, the splatter art, and then somebody was to put the same Jackson Pollock painting right next to it, and you couldn't, whereas the first one, you could see the freedom in it. To look at the second one, to see the exactitude and the meticulousness of what would have to be involved to be able to reproduce this thing. And the whole thing is that it will get close. It can get close, but it'll never be what the original was. So the idea of replication. And so that's what is happening. It sounds weird or whatever. And I'm sure people listening are going to be like, whatever, dude. But the whole Paul is dead thing. I got friends. I've met people online that have been into that since the 60s, right? The older people. And what I found really interesting is that the consensus amongst those serious researchers into the Paul is dead thing, none of them think, well, some of them do, but most of them don't think that Paul actually died. What they think is that Paul had a replicant. So somebody basically received amazing plastic surgery, because the times when they believe it's another Paul, there's indications, and those indications stay consistent, and they're only for particular lengths of time after Paul disappeared and his return. And then it kind of settles, and then it doesn't keep happening so much. And so they're they're looking at the distinctions in the facial structure and the voice and all kinds of stuff. And they're like, well, these changes are consistent. It'd be one thing if it was lighting and you're like, oh, well, that day or whatever. But it's like, no. These are specific changes that keep going. And so, and then you have Linda McCartney being interviewed where she's saying, oh, this is something so terrible. And they're like, you talking about an affair or something? And she's like, no, worse, much worse. But she won't say what it is. And she never did, and she's crying about it. And you're like, what the fuck is she talking about? But, but anyways, but that's the thing is that I relate to that. And I'm like, that idea of the perfect replicant, I think, is the ultimate way to fuck with people and what they're if you know the mysteries and what they're about, what the mystery schools have been communicating around the principle of Jachin and Boaz, because it's a big joke, because you say Jachin and Boaz, you say established in strength, right? Established in is the right pillar, strength is the left, so established in implies this is where the strength is established. So it's how can the left be strength if you just looked at the other side and saw established in? You see what I'm saying? It's a paradox. So it's where is the strength then? So that becomes a question for us. So we have our whole, if you watch the whole trilogy of Back to the Future and it ends with Marty turning the truck around, where he keeps being called chicken. And so it's Flea or whatever from Red Hot Chili Peppers. Yes, can't remember what his name is. I should know that, but. Right. Well, there's Biff, but then there's the young Biff. I should know this, but
Biff was kind of
Needles.
buff.
It's Needles. It's that guy Needles, and they're gonna drag race, right? They want to race him on the road, and he's getting ready. He's revving up his engine, but then he flips it, and he's with his girlfriend, right? And he turns around, and he's like, "I'm not crazy or whatever," and it shows that he would have died if he would have continued because his car came out or whatever. But it's that flipping. That's the whole thing, because it becomes a question of what is strength, because people keep calling him chicken and he keeps having to prove himself. What happens in Back to the Future, and the moral of the whole series is basically the moral of what Israel is going to deal with and has been, what it doesn't want to face around what constitutes real strength, And so there's this whole thing in the Zohar where it's saying, in relationship to this prophecy that Israel will act mightily. There's two sections to the text. The first section, though obviously Israel isn't a nation until 1947, oddly reads a lot like propaganda, because it doesn't come across the same way as the second section. It's just seems to be speaking really highly of Israel. But the second section, which is much longer, much longer, and much more involved, does not speak highly of Israel. It has Israel is going to be worshiping another name, and here's the dynamics of that name, and this is all about greed and our compulsions and all this stuff. And it's like, whoa, dude, this is not. Yeah, so that's the kicker. And so what I wonder is, I'm looking at like, are people being given like the first section of this text in certain secret, not so secret schools? Like, are they being shared this, but they're not being shown that, and then they're not being shown the commentary that explains it further and stuff, and that some people are, and like, I don't know, because it's like, if I was to take the one just on its own terms, even with the commentary, I wouldn't be saying a lot of the stuff that I'm saying here now, because it wasn't until looking at the other section that followed that I was like, oh, okay, because this is a whole different part of the book. You can go that your entire life studying the Zohar and never stumble on this, because it's just such an enormous book, requires years and years and years and years and years and years of study,
So I got a funny question for you here. So after looking at all these movies, going back quite a ways and matching them to albums and all this kind of stuff, and looking through the symbolism and now lately, I don't know how long it's been going on, but over the last, like, let's just guess and say 5 to 10 years or whatever, where Hollywood scripts are being written by other organizations or amended by other organizations. Like, you have the Lear Foundation who have who have like put social justice warrior stuff or social engineering into these scripts, like, fun, and who knows who the Lear Foundation is funded by. And then you've got the DOD and CIA involved in scripts. I mean, is that changed? Like, has anything shifted back from like, I almost feel like there's been a shift, and original stuff would have synchronized better, but this stuff is almost like fake. It's kind of fakery in a way. Like, it's not quite true art.
Well, there's something else going on, and the things have changed over time. So like, I have this my extrapolation is that this actually all started with the Beatles' Revolver. So Beatles' Revolver and Bluebird from 1918 are like a perfect match. And so I don't know if you know about Bluebird. But Bluebird, I think it's originally a Russian story, but whatever the case, America and Russia went back and forth doing their own versions of Bluebird. So you have the Bluebird of happiness, right? And it's a question about what is happiness. And so you have communism, capitalism. And they go back and forth with their versions of Bluebird. Even in the 1970s, Jane Fonda was in a version of Bluebird that was filmed in Russia during the Cold War. And as far as I can tell, it wasn't even a movie that was like meant for distribution. It was just a movie that had to be made for symbolic purposes. But that seems to be where it started. And the second one that I confess, there could be earlier ones, I don't know. But that's the earliest I've ever found, is Beatles' Revolver and Bluebird. Obviously an old movie. But the album, 1967, I think. Or 66. But the second one is the Rolling Stones, Their Majesty's Satanic Request, and the film Magical Mystery Tour. Now, the Magical Mystery Tour EP was released on December 8th, 1967. Same day and year as Their Majesty's Satanic Request, Rolling Stones. And so that's the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. That's the day John Lennon was killed. It's Jim Morrison's birthday. It's 9 months before 9/11. It's this whole thing. So you have the Immaculate Conception, obviously. Rosemary's Baby, what are you watching? But a qliphothic communication of the Immaculate Conception. So I'm looking at the timeline and the way that things evolved. And when I get through my syncs that are like the most solid, where I'm just like, okay, give me a fucking break. I'm open to some really weird shit, but like, for this to happen to this degree on its own in such a way, and then if you know backstories a little bit and you can see connections between the actual the film producers and the musicians, like Holy Mountain Hollywood's like that. Marilyn Manson, I didn't know when I put those two together that Marilyn Manson was like, essentially a student of Alejandro Jodorowsky. He's his close friend, but Jodorowsky, the director, officiated his fucking wedding. Like, I put those together not even knowing that, and I'm just like, oh, okay, give me a break. The Cloud Atlas Imagine Dragons one is fucking off the chart. Oh yeah,
that's the one I watched recently. Is that one of the ones you linked to us, that you sent to us?
Right. Yeah. And so the thing with that one, and the thing with a lot of these that that are more recent, is that there's more of a consistency where you'll find the film being released right around the same time as the album.
Oh, okay.
And so like Die Antwoord's most recent album pairs with Suicide Squad, like nobody's fucking business. But they came out super close to each other. And so if Occam's razor, my extrapolation is that, these were produced together, I think, people would have a conception of what would it take, what would be involved for something like that. And because the nature of things, I think intention alone goes a long way. And you can fine tune things to adjust things to make them fit just, and especially if you're editing a film and you're editing an album, you can do some tricks, to make things kick up a notch, to make them really pop. Yeah. And so I find that the ones where the albums came out really close to the films are generally the best. But there's there's exceptional things. Like, obviously, The Wizard of Oz came out a long time before Dark Side of the Moon, Yeah. What would be involved for them to do that, It becomes an interesting question, But I wouldn't put it past them, because you look at what's going on all over the place, and that would really explain a lot of Crowley's stuff, too. Because Crowley came up with the backmasking thing.
Floyd was into a lot of weird stuff back then too. I mean, Floyd was kind of ahead of their time.
Oh, yeah,
I think, for some of that psychedelic stuff, and they were talking about some pretty trippy shit.
I was hanging out with Andrea Galler, who was one of Syd Barrett's one and only loves or whatever, and when I was in London recently, and she made a coat for me. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Withnail and I. But I had the original designer of the coat from Withnail and I basically have a coat made for me on Savile Row. And so I got to go to her house and show her some of these things. I showed her Eyes Wide Shut and Leonard Cohen's You Want It Darker, which is pretty freaking phenomenal. So his last album, Leonard Cohen's last album, pairs with Eyes Wide Shut like nobody's fucking business.
Wow.
Anyways, I shared this with her, and she really enjoyed it. And she was with oh God, I hope I get it. Alan Aldridge, is that it? It was the main flyer producer in London in the 1960s. So what Rick Griffin was for the West Coast and beyond America, Alan Aldridge was for London, and that was her partner. And she just left the funeral when I called her. And I didn't know who I was calling. I thought I was just calling somebody that did recreations of this coat or whatever, And no, I went and I met with her, and then she, we went out for coffee a couple times, and she invited me to her house and made me dinner, and I showed her my films, and it was just incredible. But so the song Bike was written for her. So I got a bike, you can ride it if you like,
It's got bells and things and things that make it look good.
Well, that's the coat. But yeah, same song. But yeah, so basically she was following him on a bike or whatever, and it was like he had like a motor on his, and then she was like, "Oh, can I have your bike?" And he was like, "I'd give it to you if I could, but I borrowed it." Like that actually happened. And it was like her, and then she got to hear the song after whatever. To tell the story, I just sound like I'm bragging. Ooh, I know, whatever, But
it's pretty interesting.
It was a total fucking trip, man, and then I got some insight as to from her perception of what happened with Sid, and that it was a genuine accident. It was an overdose and all this stuff, It's like that was just something that was sitting on the table, and he didn't know what he was doing. He, took a shot glass of acid or whatever, and they didn't know what to do with him, and he was never the same after that, And so it was like he thought he was literally taking a shot, I guess. That's my understanding. She's saying it was an accident.
Wow. And just so people know, Syd Barrett was like one of the originators in Pink Floyd, right? He was there before.
He was the original lead singer of Pink Floyd, yeah.
Before Roger Waters.
Yeah, even more than just singing. He was his conception,
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that he never really left the band. And there's something that plays into this about sacrifice, It's like the nature of things. The level that we're looking at isn't the primary level if you relate to things in terms of emanation. We're looking at the skin of the thing, of the serpent, as though it were the body. And the body moves forward beyond the skin. We watch the birth, growth, decay process, whatever, and we think we know what the fuck is going on, but there is a whole other dimension to the thing. And that's why I don't consider the Masonic G in and of itself fucking evil. I think it's a very deep, meaningful thing, and I think that's a misconception. There's probably Masons that relate to it on their own terms all over the place. I don't think most Masons know that 868 the Sefer Yetzirah bit, with the 12 diagonals and all of that. But, there's weird shit. Sharon Tate's first movie was called, had the alternative title of 13. So Eye of the Devil was also released as 13. Her last movie was called 12 plus 1. Or 13 chairs, alternatively 13 chairs. So, and then the first movie, Eye of the Devil, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It pairs with Abbey Road. The photo for Abbey Road was taken within 24 hours of Sharon Tate's death.
Jesus.
So there's this whole thing going on. But Eye of the Devil is it's a total Golden Bough movie. It's about the ritualistic killing of the king. That's what happens. But in her case, it's demonstrating, because see that the Empress forms a cross with the High Priestess in the Kabbalistic tree. And that's what connects the supernal to the terrestrial, is this cross. And so that's what we're seeing communicated, is that that's a female. The stone that the builders rejected, in the New Testament, they equate that with Jesus or whatever, but that's a feminine thing that relates to the Shekinah. That means what is actually being sacrificed for the empire to extend itself. And that's it's a principle, but yeah.
Huh. So you went back to the beginning of that, where you talked about Beatles Revolver or whatever. And then you talked about Cloud Atlas, which was kind of one of the more recent ones. But have you seen a shift in the newer kind of altered with scripts and movies? Like, is it different now?
Yeah, they're working more with the ending of the movie. So if you're using an editing program, it becomes more obvious, like the timing thing. Because it's not just if you find the pairing, because you can find that things will be resonant. And it used to be that I had to spend days and days and days and days trying to narrow down until it actually landed. And that makes you feel fucking crazy. Because you go through your own cognitive dissonance. And I've talked to other people who've experienced the same. Because if you're assuming, in order to keep working like that, like if I'm playing fucking Lady Gaga's The Fame Monster with Metropolis, the silent film from Germany from the 20s, and I'm listening to that album over and over and over again and looking to see, well, could this be better? Could this be better? Could this be better? Like, that is such a insane thing to do, because it implies that you're assuming that this will actually land and it will actually do this thing. Now, if you're using an editing program, it really simplifies things. With the older synchronicities, you find the anchor points at the beginning. With these later ones, you can see where what would be the last song, sometimes last song in the album, but whatever the case, you look at how it aligns to the end, how it'll end. You can preview that, and so you can see where it would happen to line at the beginning. So if you do it in reverse, that's a huge aid. But what's funny is that I've seen a consistent difference between the newer ones over the last, say, 10 to 20 years and the previous ones. These are more, you generally can find an anchor point at the end easier than you can find it at the beginning, which didn't used to be true. It's kind of weird. So that's the thing. It's like, experientially, it's a matter of syntax. Because it's like, I can tell someone about this stuff, and like, it's weird too, because like, I can't like advertise my own work, because everyone thinks their work is the shit. Whatever it is that they do, they're like, oh no, it's like, and I'm not necessarily, I haven't been the best at self-promotion in general. So I'm just like, oh no, this is fucking amazing. But everyone thinks whatever they do is amazing. But it's true. Like, I've gotten the feedback that it's like, not until you watch it do you know what it is that I'm even talking about. Because people will get an idea and they're like, oh, I think I know, no, it doesn't work that way. And so also these things have to be judged on a whole as well, But as it stands, there's over 100 videos for download and streaming on that website.
That's syncbook.com, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we made
incredible.
it. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's I've had some help.
What else are you doing in the near future then?
I have a trip planned for winter to go back to the ABBA Museum and see if I can convince the coordinator, who I've been in communication with email. I want to convince her to basically approach the production company of Waterloo, that's Columbia, to see if they can show, because they have a theater in Stockholm at the ABBA Museum. And so, like, I don't need to be there for it, but I want that event to happen. And
so they would show it looped twice over that movie? Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
that's what I would like them to do.
It is a pretty interesting
we have listeners in Germany that we could send there to tape it.
Swedish, you mean? Sweden?
I thought he said Germany.
Did he say Germany?
No, it's Sweden. Yeah.
Sweden.
Stockholm.
Well, we probably have some listeners in Sweden too, I'm sure.
Darren's got Stockholm syndrome in the igloo.
I may have said Germany. I don't know what the fuck. But yeah, no, it's this whole thing where I'm just like, I've had such, like, if I try and send a message to freaking Columbia about, hey, I want to do this thing, it doesn't have any clout, but I'm just like, I want to talk to this woman and be like, hey, could you, I almost don't even want to be saying this because it's like a plan, kind of thing. I'm like, okay, that was my angle, but whatever, I'm going to voice it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool looking at that movie. That's an epic movie to see. I've never seen it before, I don't think. Or I might have seen it. I kind of recognize a little bit of it, but it's pretty epic watching it with ABBA in the background. It's pretty cool. It's interesting. Yeah.
So I did another, right before this call, actually, I changed out the video to the one I had prior, which is actually puts the volume up in between tracks. and I might even play with it a bit further just to perfect it, especially if I'm going to be projecting it for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But some of these have the volume rate, and sometimes it's extremely meticulous process. I mean, I've spent done many all-nighters working on these things. Well, multiple all-nighters, because some of them, I'm playing with the volume in it, and some of them I just leave it because that feels more appropriate. And so, but then, at times it gets really uncanny. Like the Field of Dreams one, the recent one with Bull Durham and center field, like that one, I just go with the volume for both films back and forth through the whole thing. At any time that there's the slightest break in the vocals, I come in with the films, and that's really satisfying when they land like that. Because it's one thing for it to land in the first place, but then for it to go that far with that is kind of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
I wonder if it's just some big crazy simulation
That's what I was thinking.
Gets entangled with itself and it's using similar algorithms or some shit we can't understand.
I get the
it's
feeling
using the racist algorithms.
No, it's more like somebody playing a video game and lining all this stuff up and just figuring out, like, can they put all these puzzles in our matrix and get people to figure it out?
Yeah, maybe.
Right,
I
don't know.
All subtle nuance of the fucking machine not...
The fucking kicker is, though,
it's like
you guys.
not bothering to make extra work, the same as the argument that the inside of the tree doesn't exist, because it's like, fuck it, I don't need to do that right now. If you cut the tree down, I'll deal with it.
I've never heard that argument
And now
before.
they're like,
you changed that argument.
No, I didn't change it. You just confused me. And now David is breaking the code. So you get ready for some Da Vinci Code shit to start going down. The closer you get.
So if you watch so I made this 7.5 hour film, and it's the length that it is as an homage to 2001: A Space Odyssey, because as not just that, but the tagline for 2001. So all the original posters that went out were the ultimate trip, and so all these people dosed acid to go to the theater to watch it, and then it was like it's an hour, 142 minutes, and so once it's over, they're high as fuck, and then they got to walk out into the street and find their way home, or wherever they're going, So it's like so I was like, even though it's not a theater thing or whatever, I was like the principle of the thing. I was like, I want to make a film that's actually the length of a trip, that is a true trip that's related to 2001. And so that's what my Sorry Cassandra film is.
Oh, I forgot I was going to do that. Well, in my defense, I don't think I've tripped out since.
Okay.
But I'm planning. Maybe we could do that on Grimerica Psilocybus too. We'll throw that on the speakers.
Yeah,
you gotta sit down and watch it through the whole trip. You can't just listen to it. It's a visual and an audio thing.
And we'll throw that on the dashboard Night Rider, and we'll just fucking zoom. You can't watch. You got to drive.
Well, what I was going to say is that the thing is with that, and what I demonstrate in that film, which it takes a long time to wrap around, is that there's this, and it's not just there, it's all over the place. There's a repeated phenomenon of where you'll have a huge event take place. In this case, it's two fires in the U.S., the two biggest hotel fires in the U.S. One was at the Weinkauf Hotel in Atlanta, Georgia, in 1947, I think. And the other one is at the MGM Grand in 1980. Now, the film, The Visitor, is an Italian film, was released the day and year of the MGM fire. And the movie's about a little girl who there's basically demons and angels fighting over her soul. So she's kind of like a special power, like Messiah type figure, and they're fighting for her. But there's these really strange things that happen where the little girl will undo a fire escape with her mind, and all these people will crowd around the fire escape once it drops, and there's no explanation, It's why are they doing that like that? It's really weird. But that was the big thing with the MGM fire, was this place was built like a giant Mayan pyramid. All these people died, but there was no fire escapes. So it was and then no alarms were set off. And they don't even really know how the fire started, and it's super suspicious. But then I'm like, okay, well, what is the probability for this movie to come out the day and year of the fire? And then if you watch the movie, one of the opening scenes, the whole thing takes place in Atlanta. And then one of the opening scenes, I'm looking at the screen, I'm like, okay, well, this is a section of the city of Atlanta. And then I'm like, and so I go to my friend who's obsessed with this movie anyway. It's a cult classic or whatever, obscure, but it's still a cult thing. And I ask him, I'm like, hey, is this hotel from the first biggest hotel fire in this shot, in this movie that took place, that was released the day and year of the second biggest hotel fire? And he's like, yeah, not only is it in the shot, but it's directly in the center. And so I'm like, okay, so this movie pivots around through the thing. It pivots around the location of the first biggest hotel fire, comes out the day. So there's not supposed to be prior knowledge of the event, right? This is supposed to be just a terrible thing that happened. Okay, a hotel caught on fire, you know? But it's like that implies if you know, and otherwise it's just like, I don't know, something about the unconscious right brain. I don't know what the fuck, how that could happen.
With 9/11 too.
Yeah, but are you predicting it or causing it to happen?
Right. They say synchronicity in a causal principle. That's the definition from Jung. So I don't really know. Are we looking at the wiring under the boards? Are they like lifting up rocks and finding all the strange worms underneath? What the fuck is going on? But the thing is that ABBA then released their last album shortly after that called The Visitors. The Visitor, the movie, was originally going to be called The Visitors, and there's actually posters for it that say that. But in that album, there's all these references to fire, like dying in a friggin' fire. Like an angel passing through my room is totally, and so this fire also took place on Archangel Michael's feast day. And and so there's this whole thing where the director of the film went by the alias of Michael J. Paradise. It's not his fucking name. This took place in Paradise, Nevada, where the MGM fire was. So, like, what are the chances of Archangel Michael's feast day leading the souls for,
it's too many.
It's too much, dude. Yeah. So that, like, if you watch my film, that's what it's mainly focused on is these two fires. But then I go in all these other directions because I'm basically, the 119 people died in the first one. And so there's this issue with Tisha B'Av. Like, Tisha B'Av isn't just like, okay, every 2,000 years this thing happens. It's like this is in the nature of like what was communicated through Greek tragedy and what the function of the Seder chorus was. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Nietzsche's early work of the birth of tragedy and from the spirit of music. But there's this whole. It's actually what. Burning Man is modeled after, beyond obviously the Wicker Man Golden Bough thing, because I mean Golden Bough has a lot to do with the Wicker Man. I don't know the sacrifice, for the crops and all this stuff. But if you're looking at the layout of Burning Man from as an aerial view from above, it matches the exact layout of Dionysian theater to the cue. So the point where the man would be is actually the stage. But in Dionysian theater, everyone knew these plays. They knew them inside and out, and they watched them over and over and over again, right? And then you have this whole thing where the actors are trying to literally like embody that character to the point where they're basically like possessed by it. So kind of what's his name? The Joker, the Heath Ledger kind of thing, where you're like, how far are you going to take this, But there's this whole thing where you got these people dressed up as satyrs, and there's 3 sections to the Seder chorus, and they play music. And the music that they play and the lyrics that they're presenting literally drown out the sound from the stage for the most part. So people are listening to this music, and the music is meant to be the subtext of what's going on in the play. Because the people know it so well, it doesn't freaking matter. They know what those lines are in the play. They have them memorized. And so you have this whole audience, and it seems like they're just, it's a whole psychedelic thing because it's Dionysian, right? Dionysus, intoxicant, right? Whatever. It doesn't have to be toxic, but you get what I mean. So entheogens, who knows what was going on. But the point is that they're relating through this interface of the Seder chorus. And so my feeling on what I'm looking at is that this shit is not for the public. It's for the producers. It's not intended for mass consumption. That's the whole point. If you produce something, like if you have a connection to your own art, wouldn't it be interesting to have a way that you could share that and relate to it on your own terms without the way that it was, presented to everyone else? Can you communicate another point through your art? Like, so people ask me, like, sometimes I'll show these to people, and initially, before they've sat through one, they'll be like, why would they do this? Why would they do this? And like, from all my experience of over 20 years of playing with this shit, I'm just like, why on earth wouldn't they do this? This is fucking where it's at. Cause it's extremely subversive. And it's not like, people tend to go after the artists, like, before they go after fucking real criminals. That blows my mind. And I'm not saying that, like, artists don't, who knows what the fuck shit goes on. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, what about the fucking Rat Pack with the Satanic Church, and God knows how they're involved in certain things, No one wants to mention that Susan Atkins, who actually killed Sharon Tate, was a member of the Satanic Church. And had, was basically got out of the coffin and pointed at her next victim and shit with likely Sharon Tate was in the room. It's like that wasn't in court. I wonder why, but anyways, I just find it really interesting that there's this repeated issue where it's like the people, like, what art does. Art by necessity, I don't know, people can make other arguments, but what I see as real art is like, if you can produce a song and have double or triple meanings and get it out there, and to be able to get out because of restrictions that are on us in society, to be able to navigate that and communicate something else, that is a true art form.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate puzzles. Like if you're editing the end of a movie and you want to sync it to a couple songs and hide some sort of puzzle in there. I mean, that's the ultimate.
Right.
Ultimate locked
I mean, on
room.
a simpler level, just the way more people are generally familiar with it, is the song facts thing, where it's like, if you're like, okay, Moonlight Drive, The Doors, where it's like, let's swim to the moon, let's climb to the tide, penetrate the evening that the city sleeps to hide. That song is totally about having sex with a woman who's menstruating, or girl in this case. It's like young people going for their moonlight drive or whatever. But that's why it's a swim to the moon, climb to the tide. He's talking about how you don't have to worry about pregnancy because she's bleeding. So, and if there was any question, it's confirmed at the end of the song when he goes, children of the caves will let their secret fires glow, or whatever. No, baby's gonna drown tonight. He says that. He says, going down, 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 baby's gonna drown tonight.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Yeah. Like, give me a break. That was on the radio, is my point.
Yeah.
Like, that got radio play. Like, Come Together Right Now Over Me, three-way story. Like, give me a break. Why is he so hard to see? He's so good looking. He's so hard to see because there's two people on top of him.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and all that.
Totally. Which then they, at the time, they said, no, John says, no, it's a drawing that my kid did. Had nothing to do with that. And then years later, you got Paul McCartney being like, no, that was an acronym for LSD. No question.
Yeah.
And then it's like, we all knew that anyway, but it's like, they can deny all they want to. You ask Roger Waters what he thinks of Dark Side of the Moon Wizard of Oz. He's like, oh, people, crazy, whatever. Yeah, I think it was one of the other members of the band. I can't remember.
Gilmour, or no?
Ryder Mason. Not David Gilmour. Could have been Mason. But he was asked, I saw it wasn't an interview. Somebody just asked him in passing what he thought of Dark Side of the Moon, The Wizard of Oz. And he turned, he's like, oh, well, have you tried any other albums with any other films? And he kind of smiles. And then he keeps walking. He totally says that. And I was like, what? I wish I could find it. I tried to find it again like a while back, and I couldn't spot it. But it's out there. I swear. You can find this fucking video. It exists. But yeah, it's this little clip. And he has this kind of response with a smirk on his face.
Cool,
and it's like, oh, that's fucking priceless.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, so that's the thing too, is like, I'm like, well, if it's happening at all, it's happening a lot. Because there's no like, okay, somebody just thought to do like, with the older stuff too, it's like, why wouldn't, I don't know.
It could be, I mean, now that you're talking about it, then there is so many examples. It could be a little inner secret around that, in there as well, little, kind of a thing that the producers
spitting
do.
in your food at the restaurant.
What?
It's like an inside joke.
No, not at all like that.
It's just to have a secret be half revealed and half concealed at the same time is so Masonically classic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The principle of that thing,
It's almost like giving you permission to do it, right? Because you told the people you could, you told them. You disclose the truth in a hidden way, so that gives you permission to do those acts that may not be.
There's the phenomenon of so there's a classic method of, there's a trick that Kabbalists would do where they can take a text and they'll take another text and they'll interweave them. And it's the same word for prayer, like if your hands are folded in prayer, it's just a Kabbalistic literary device that's referenced, in different places. But there's this whole thing where I was looking at Jim Morrison's An American Prayer, and I noticed that every little section had a dash. His original handwriting and his original notebook of when he wrote An American Prayer. And so I went through the whole thing and counted each dash. And I saw that it fit perfectly into Aleister Crowley's first section of the Book of the Law. And in the Book of the Law, Crowley, in that section, he says, leave the second section unattacked, but he invites you to attack the first section. And so I'm like, it becomes this crazy psychedelic conversation. I have it on my blog from a long time ago, from like 2010 or whatever, when I put it together. But if you interweave An American Prayer and the Book of the Law, it achieves this incredible effect where I swear to fucking God, it's a total conversation. There's things that are said that are so, he's like, Crowley be like, nor do I demand aught in sacrifice. The next line from Morrison is blood, 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 blood. They're making a joke of our universe. He's like, oh, here comes the goat or whatever. It's like, what is he says? Crowley has, behold my light shed over you. And then the next line from Morrison is, the moths and atheists are doubly divine and dying. My light shed over you, the moths. It's like, it's moth,
Yeah.
I'm saying it's a total trip, and it's an example of the same principle of the thing, where it's like, how do you subversively communicate something without having it be, exoteric, how can you,
Yeah, oh, that's fascinating. So what are you going to do after you travel back to Sweden there and try and schmooze that curator?
Oh, I don't know. I just keep producing my stuff and just kind of like, hoping that it stays up, hoping that I'm able to stay afloat in my world, because you never know. I've lost a lot of my work over time, and had crazy shit happen. And so, I'm just trying to navigate the waters as best I can. I just got my old job back driving a taxi cab. So
oh, nice. Okay.
Drive a cab around town, biodiesel taxi. It's a Mercedes. It's fun. Good boss and stuff. And so, I left my other job with my rabbi after 12 years. And so that's kind of a long personal story, but, a lot of shit's going on,
So does that give you time to consume? Do you, when you're driving a taxi, does that give you time to do research and consume while you're not busy?
Oh, it's just a lot of conversation.
I
like it. I've been spending a lot of time just kind of like hermiting out, and that's been good because I've accomplished more creatively than I have at any other point in my life, especially in the last year. Yeah. So, I had a near-death experience with ayahuasca where my intestine twisted shut and had to spend 5 days in the hospital, and I purged for 20 hours straight. And the head doctor at the hospital was like, "You would have been dead within the hour if we didn't get you when we did." It was just this fucking horrific event, and then it was a catalyst for the end of a 4.5-year relationship. It happened on my girlfriend's birthday, and it's just all this. Yeah, that was a while ago. I had some crazy shit go down. Yeah.
So you had a trip during ayahuasca where you felt your intestines, like you knew that's what was happening, and then when you went to the hospital,
I didn't know what was happening. I just felt like I was shot in the stomach all night. So, it was the most excruciating pain I've ever felt by far, yeah.
And then was it from the ayahuasca?
Just because ayahuasca is a purgative.
Yeah, you were purging, and that's what happened. It was
combined with that. When I was young, when I was like 10, I had ulcers, and so it caused the elasticity of my intestine right below my stomach to change, and so because of that, combined with the thing, it was just like a perfect storm of that, whatever. It did this thing. And so, I twisted shut, and that was, seriously 20 hours of vomiting straight. So, and I was just dry heaving, and, still, even in the morning, even 20 hours later, I was still purging the medicine. I could see the medicine, I was like, whoa. That was my 8th time doing it, and I still recommend it to people. I'm not down on ayahuasca. It was she was really hard on me,
Did you have a sort of some of the typical NDE type stuff happen, or was it just more of a real bad trip?
Oh, I went completely numb from head to toe. I hyperventilated on the hospital floor.
Jesus.
And so, and I every time I would purge, I was still getting these really intense visions, it was like really coming through. It was intense. I was still high. Even there was no amount of purging that was stopping that, and even 20 hours later, which does not seem right, but it was because it wasn't going down.
Yeah.
So it did this thing.
It's like you're on a microdose all the time. It's just slow feeding you.
It was a trip, yeah. But whatever. Like that's like a lot of things, It's like you. When there's futility involved, it makes it a lot easier if you can come to terms with the idea of futility, because it's like there's no point. Who am I gonna do? I can only do what I can, So it's like. It helped put a lot of things in perspective. Also really taught me about how limited my time is here, and wanting to get it together to not, waste my whole experience. I will waste it to a degree, but,
Yeah. No, but
it try and share what I can and do what I can, Yeah.
Well, this has been a great chat, eh?
Yeah.
That's right, good. Yeah. Mind blown again.
Wow.
It brought back a lot of things from the other episode that I had forgotten about.
Cool.
All the
Trying to do the trip out thing. Maybe I'll just lock myself in here with some mushrooms and a webcam. We'll just fucking plow through it.
Well,
I feel like if I do that, I should align that with some sort of cause, and it can be like a thing where people can donate to some charity, and it just goes up while I'm in here, just like like a trapped rat. Lock the door.
Yeah.
The studio locks from the outside, so Graham could lock me right in here.
Oh, despite all your rage.
Actually, we shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't say that out loud.
Oh, one day we'll just go after the show. We can't get out.
Was I talking? Did they hear me?
Someone's trapped mouse in your own studio.
Of course, this is live, so you can't even edit it.
I don't edit anyway.
Yeah.
It's
right on.
be raw, baby.
Yeah, thanks for coming on again.
Oh, thank you, man. I totally appreciate it. And yeah, if you could just get the links in there so that people can check out my work, that would be awesome.
For sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
What is the URL again for the people that are too lazy to check out the show notes?
Oh, hang on. He knocked the cord.
You knocked the cord?
Okay, yeah. Okay, you're back. Okay, syncbook.com, right?
Yeah, if you go to the syncbook.com and you see Syncflix with an X, Flix, that's, it would actually, if you were to type it all out, it would be the syncbook.com/syncmediaresearch. But if you just go to syncbook.com, you'll see Syncflix. If you click on there, there'll be 100 full-length feature album film pairings that I've put over 20 years of work into.
Nice.
Discovering. So, yeah. So, they're the highest quality that I was able to get them. And we made it a point, me and my friend in France, to be able to do what we did. And because of what they are, sometimes for people's computers, it can be a little challenging. For my computer, it's no big deal. And for most people's, it's no big deal. But for some, they express that. So that's why we included a download option right below each film. So if you click on the film and then the film comes up, you can see download, and that's I'll tell you, they deliver. So check it out.
Right on, buddy. Well, thanks. Yeah, that's great chat, good stories, good synchronicities, some crazy stuff.
Good times.
Cool. Thank you.
Always fun. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah. Take care, guys.
Okay. See you later.
Bye.
And that was our chat with David Charles Platt, number 2.
Yeah, that was great. Crazy shit, man. I wish, we got to have bullet all those little things, all those dates and all those crazy coincidences.
I was writing it all down here. I was writing like this, like doing some automatic writing.
Well, you're not automatic writing if you're listening to something like that. Do you know what that is?
Well, yeah, I was like, but I wasn't writing down everything. I was just, he would
That's
say
what I
something.
do. That's what I do with the show notes every episode. So when I do show notes, it's just automatic writing. Look at mine. That's what I do. That's every day.
Well, I put mine into an artistic set.
Did you take a picture of it at least?
No, I just erased it.
Really?
I think I did take a picture, actually.
You can't, that's the short-term memory. You can't even remember they took a picture of his latest artwork.
I think we're still alive, too.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Something about the live chats that make us laugh.
I forgot we were live. So, big thanks, David, coming back on the show. Always a fun one.
Yeah, that was good.
That was great.
That was kind of mind-blowing.
It was better longer. I think we went a little longer this time.
Did we? Yeah. Well, it flew by. It's one of those. Yeah.
It always does. It always does. So make sure you check out the show notes and check out David's website. Share it with your friends, just like you're supposed to share the show with your friends. Of course, check out grimerica.ca/support. There's a bunch of different ways there. We got the new website. It's going to take you right away to the support page where you can sign up for a monthly, or you can do a one-time donation. That'll get you access to our extra content.
Black budget feed.
Yeah. And, you can't do that. You can tell your friends, maybe do a jingle, share the show, review the show. There's a whole list of stuff in the show notes. If you just check the show notes and do those things once, that would be just super fabulous. You got anything else?
No, that's it. We can't do it without the listeners, really.
Can't do it without you guys. All right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Washes down the drain. They the sky for corporate heads and consumers buying. It's never enough, no, it's never enough. 'Cause enough is never enough, no. Enough is never enough, no. Enough, it's never enough. 'Cause enough is never enough, no. Enough is never enough, no. Enough, it's never enough. I've been around long enough to know what makes the world turn and the people go. Believe me, I've read some books and the ink turned the letters on a page and taught me how to act my age. But I'm no wise man. Love and war and peace and money, sex and drugs and rock and roll, power, pleasure, pain and suffer, bring pride and virtue, and don't forget authority. The man about fractals in your eyes are geometric infinities, like black holes on the edge of the universe. It's kind of like when you die. It's kind of like when you die. Forever, forever, forever and ever. Forever, forever, forever and ever. Forever, 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 forever and ever. Forever, forever, forever and ever. Forever, 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 forever and ever and ever. Boys, keep that blue ball spinning until the day you die. Until the day you die. Love and boys, keep that ball spinning until the day you die. Until the day you die. Love, pleasure, ball spinning until the day you die. Until the day you die. And don't forget authority.
Hailstorm damage got you blue? Sunburn get you let down? Well, introducing the new Chemtrails. Chemtrails are a convenient new chemtrail that we plow through your sky to ensure you with the haziest and non-blue sky that you could have. Chemtrails. Choose from our variety of geo-engineered aerosols loaded with toxic chemicals. Some chemicals may include barium, strontium-90, aluminum, cadmium, zinc, viruses of all sorts and varieties, and chafe, which actually looks like snow, but may actually be fibers coated with aluminum, desiccated blood cells, plastic, and paper. All chemtrails can be conveniently customized for your needs. Just ask our friend here, James Cruz. Chemtrails. James Cruz ordered the barium, strontium-90, and the chafe. And the chafe he chose was desiccated blood cells and plastic. Chemtrails.
So I'm sitting in my backyard, getting sunburned constantly, and I hear this ad come on the radio. Chemtrails. Chemtrails. And what they can do for you is amazing. For 33 payments of $333. Chemtrails. No more sunburn. Thanks, Chemtrails. Chemtrails. Thanks, Chemtrails.
Chemtrails. That's right, James. For 33 easy payments of $330, you too can have a hazy sky with zero sun and zero sunburn. With our brand new technology coming straight out of MIT, we fitted an airplane with nozzles, and we can come to any area in the world and spray your backyard. Chemtrails. Warning, warning, warning. Symptoms associated with chemtrails include aneurysms, strokes, heart attacks, and cancer. Chemtrails. Other side effects may include irradiated breast milk, anal leakage, jock itch, runny nose, irregular vaginal discharge, glaucoma, heavy metal poisoning, lockjaw, and low sperm count, persistent hacking, coughing, upper respiratory and intestinal distress, pneumonia, extreme fatigue, disorientation, lethargia, dizziness, splitting headaches, elevated arthritis symptoms, nosebleeds, blah, 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 yada, yada, etc., doctors, blah, 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 death. Chemtrails. If you want it, we spray it. So get your Chemtrails today. Call 1-900-GRAY-SKY. That's 1-900-GRAY-SKY. That's 1-900-WEFUCKED.
Thanks, Chemtrails.